What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Liam's First Look. This week on the show, we're talking, of course, about UFC London. Tom Aspinall is taking on Marcin Tybura in the main event. And we've got a fun fight night card to break down. It's not the normal Apex, phone it in, UFC's half paying attention. No, it's an international card. So we've only got 3 debutantes on the bill. We've got a lot of fun, interesting action fights to talk about. And I'm extremely excited because we're here with the sharpest chat in the game, 15 people rocking with us live. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. So if you haven't already, drop a like on this video. Let's get off to a hot start and let's talk about this main event first and foremost, as we always do. I just want to remind people off the top, these are my first looks. These are my leans. These are my thoughts about these fights. But I have a deep research process that I go through each and every week. I write about these fights on a weekly basis for work. I talk about these fights constantly throughout the week for a variety of publications. So for that reason, my process goes way deeper over the course of the week. I'll rewatch a lot of footage. I will go through and look at the odds history and all kinds of different factors, how their weight cut is going, all kinds of things, deep information. But right now, what I want to bring to you guys is my initial gut lean before the noise, before people start to get into your ear, before all the new information, because I watch a lot of fights, right? I come to the table with a ton of experience in that way. I've been doing these videos for a long time talking about fights, and people say, man, I hate waiting until Thursday to hear what you have to say. So here we are. Let's talk about the fights and let's break down this main event a little bit. And I've already done this, in terms of, actually, let's do one thing real quick, guys, because shout out to our guy, Chris V. Already the chat is off to a hot start here. He says, I'm coming off a big weekend, hit JDM by decision, plus 650. Very good stuff there, Chris. We talked about the toughness of Fez on this show, and yet I still ended up thinking that Jack was going to find that finish. I thought the club and sub was going to be there. Instead, he attempted 50 guillotines that didn't work. So we can talk about all the fights that happened over the last weekend as well. We'll circle back and talk about those after we talk about the card that is coming up. But I do just want to talk about the bets from last week really quick before we get started, because it's always accountability on this show, right? We were very happy when we had 3 winning weeks in a row, when we went 3-0-1, 4 weeks in a row. But then we did take the slight L last week. But I want to talk about how responsible bet sizing was helpful. When we had the wrong reads on some of these fights, we didn't go overboard. We didn't bet a ton on the Duraev fight, for example. 0.75 units, my biggest bet of the night, Albert Duraev. I was just wrong about this bet, guys. At the end of the day, the people that were on Jin Park, including my guest, Pepe Sylvia, on Bets and Banter, were just on the sharper side. Albert Duraev, 2 years older. He slowed down faster. The jab of Jin Park was giving him problems from the outset, as it did in the Roman Kopylov fight. So overall, just was a little bit too bullish on my guy Duraev. However, I kind of knew what he needed to do. I said Duraev finished round 1, and I thought it was going to be a KO or TKO. He landed some decent shots. He tried to trade on the feet instead of going for the takedowns. It was unfortunate, but always going to own the wins and the losses on the show. Unfortunately, our guy Duraev couldn't ship it for the boys, but our Stop Brazilian Hate play, me and Pepe coming back together once again to fade Holly home, ended up being a successful endeavor. So glad to get one over the finish line there with Mayra Buena Silva, another fun contender in the women's bantamweight division. But unfortunately, while she was bopping Holly home on the feet, she took the easy choke. And so we didn't cash the knockout play there. I would take that bet 100 times out of 100 again. And then here's the other problem, guys. I bet ends by KO plus 325 in the Norma Dumont-Chelsea Chandler fight because of all the beef, because of how they were interacting before the fight, and also because of the style. And then what happens? Norma Dumont cracks her in the first 20 seconds. I'm thinking, wow, I already cashed the bet. Let's go. And instead, she ends up, just not finding the finish there, beating her up for the whole 15 minutes instead. So God bless her for it. It was a great fight, fun fight. Both girls really fought hard in that spot, so can't complain too much. But overall, I'd make a lot of the same bets again. Just a Duraev bet, I think, if I had to do over, was not that sharp a bet, and I would probably leave that one on the cutting room floor. But overall, took a half unit loss on the evening, so still up plus 2.5 units over the last 4 events. For example, we're doing great. It's just, a small setback in the long journey, but want to always acknowledge when we do well and when we don't do so well, wasn't our best event over the weekend, but it was a pretty grimy UFC, pretty low level. A lot more excited to talk about this card that's coming up. So let's do it, starting with this main event of the evening. Tom Aspinall coming back here off of a knee surgery. I believe I definitely saw a knee injury, right? So I'm going to have to do my own due diligence here to find out exactly the nature of the injury. However, we know he's been out of the octagon, I believe almost a year now, 300 plus days for sure. And we've also seen that this is a guy, who's had a few losses now sprinkled throughout his career. So not an infallible fighter here, but the advantages on paper for Tom Aspinall in this matchup are clear as well. He's 7 years younger, for example, than Marcin Tybura. He's a much more dangerous finisher than Marcin Tybura. You look at Marcin Tybura's career, he's a very good fighter. He wins a lot of fights. He's never been submitted in a very lengthy career, fought good guys, Fabricio Verdum, for Christ's sakes. He had surgery, says my guy Jewish Better, God bless. So good point, my man. This is what I want to take into account here. My gut lean, let's just get that first and foremost out of the way. And I shared this on Patreon earlier today. I did a very in-depth, kind of breakdown of what my gut level opinions are on these fights. And my gut read is Aspinall ITD. If Aspinall is healthy, if Aspinall feels good, if Aspinall comes in here at his best peak form, you'd have to think that this is a very winnable fight for him. It's a fight in London. It's a fight against a guy who's been knocked out 4 times in his career. But let's give some flowers to Marcin Tybura, because the truth is, the numbers suggest he's a live underdog here. He's won 7 of his last 8 fights. The guy's been producing. He's had 2 fights since Tom Aspinall's last stepped foot in the octagon. So when you take that into account, Marcin Tybura is no punk, right? And by the way, let's bring up my Bet MMA tips. Guys, I do not get, any additional funds or whatever from just telling people. Track betmma.tips if you want to have a better understanding of your own bets, because they have these previous bets on this card's fighters. It's a huge asset for me. I like to go back and see, am I making money on this fighter? Do I have a good read? Or am I a fool that just keeps throwing away money? Why did I think I had a good read on Albert Duraev? I thought I had a good read because I bet Albert Duraev really well, and I bet Jin Young Park really well. I thought I had a good read there. But in any case, I have data points. I had a lot to look back on. I'm still up a lot of money on Jin Young Park fights and Albert Duraev fights. Make no mistake. So at the end of the day, it was a risk I was willing to take. I feel like I've got a good enough read on both fighters to take those kind of chances. Similarly, I've made a lot of money fading Holly Holm before. That's what got me back to the window with Vieira. Let's look at my betting history with these main event fighters. Tom Aspinall, I tried to fade with Volkov for 1 unit, for 1.75 units, at plus 115. So I tried to bet Alexander Volkov. And if you guys go back and look at my Twitter account this week at Liam Picks Fights, I retweeted analysis from the time, which is Volkov normally does a very good job of digging underhooks to prevent takedown attempts. If you guys want to see a good example, watch the Marcin Tybura fight where he stuffs like 16 takedowns in a row, right? And all the time in that fight, he's just digging underhooks. But the difference was Tom Aspinall had speed and he had fluidity to his movement. So if you go back and rewatch that fight, which I did, you go see that Tom Aspinall kind of like slips, moves, ducks, then takes the shot. And so Volkov is like on ice skates already and just gets blasted off his feet, never had a chance to defend it, and gets taken down quite easily. So that was, for me, a huge distinguishing factor, in what ultimately led to his demise. Volkov never had a first layer of defense to get to. And with Marcin Tybura, the interesting thing about this matchup is maybe he could test Aspinall on the ground if he's able to get takedowns, if he's able to get on top, because he's a pretty good top player. But he's given up takedowns a few times in the UFC, and it's cost him, important fights and positions. And he's also been hurt a number of times. There was a point in his career when he was getting knocked out so much that it looked like he might have to retire almost. But he's actually done a great job of mitigating damage since then, and he has not been finished. Even that most recent loss against Volkov, he didn't even sustain that much damage. It was just clear at the end of the day that he tried to take him down a bunch, and he failed. So I think ultimately, Marcin Tybura is not a bad fighter, but there's a certain peak level of athleticism that I just don't think he can beat guys of that ilk. And I think that they can tend to make him look bad, take him out in the first round, this kind of thing. It's been a while since he's faced a guy like that. But even the Greg Hardy fight looked really bad for Marcin Tybura until he got on top of Greg Hardy. And I've said before, with all due respect, Greg Hardy just looked like a white belt in his first class. He was under complete panic stations, he's looked like he had just seen a ghost. And every time Greg Hardy was in the bottom position in MMA, he looked like he had just seen a ghost. So that's one of the hardest aspects to get used to in fighting, in jiu-jitsu, in grappling. It's just getting used to fighting from your back comfortably and proficiently. And I think that ultimately, when you see somebody who's very athletically gifted, they can make it look okay on the feet. They can make it look okay when it's standing in the clinch maybe, but just as soon as you get to the bottom position, man, everybody becomes a white belt there, and they look scared and they cover up and do things that are not beneficial for fighting. So at the end of the day, Marcin Tybura, I think, is a very good hammer, but I do not think he's a great nail. And I think that he's had a lot of fights and opportunities to, close distance on people and make it really, scrappy, grindy, outlast people. Even the Romanov fight, I mean, it was very nearly stopped in the first round. An athletically gifted guy went out there, out wrestled him. I had Marcin Tybura as a big underdog there. So before we kick it over to my Marcin Tybura betting history, which I always talk about the betting history, not to toot my own horn. Sometimes, guys, I have bad betting histories on these fighters too. Like Robert Whittaker, who I only got a fraction of my money back with the Duplessis win, right? I've given a lot to the Whittaker fade to get to that point. So the things, that you got to realize is we talk about these past bets because it's learning experiences. I didn't win the bet on Volkov, but it did teach me that Aspinall has a different kind of takedown, right? He surprises people. Same thing with Andrei Arlovsky. Never saw the takedown coming, never defended the rear naked choke. It was already an insta tap, insta takedown situation. So Aspinall's converted his takedowns to quick finishes in the UFC, which is impressive, especially for heavyweight. You don't see that very often. So Aspinall has good offensive wrestling and offensive jiu-jitsu, especially in open space. I think that his cage wrestling and jiu-jitsu, is still something yet to be seen a little bit in the octagon. I think we could definitely see more of that in this fight if it gets extended, especially. Marcin Tybura is the king of those sloppy grind fests along the fence line, disgusting fights. So in those ways, I think that, there's a fight in which Tybura looks like complete value here, but there's also a lot of iterations in this fight where he gets smoked in the first round. Like that, Tom Aspinall wins are normally him smoking somebody in the first round, even good guys. The thing about Aspinall's record that stood out to me, and I'm just going to shout out our guy Alex in the chat, says press the like button. Absolutely, please do that. Shout out to our guy Rick the Ruler in the chat, says, I killed the card last time they were at the O2 Arena, hoping to do the same thing here. Absolutely. Our guy Gerardo Hernandez says, what's up, Liam? Appreciate you, brother. Welcome. Cole Stein says, same initial read. I'll be cheering for Tommy Aspinall this weekend. Absolutely rooting for you there, my brother. And the Jewish bettor, friend of the show, says, that dance at the end was nice. Don't lie. Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris V says the last London card was epic. So best chat in the game. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Make sure you drop a like on the video. Make sure, if you're not already, get subscribed to the damn channel, guys. We're looking to hit that next goal. We're just about there. We're last I checked, I think 6 or 7 away. So that means we got 45 people in here that can make it happen right now. And I'd appreciate if you could help out. God bless. But back to this fight, guys. At the end of the day, you got to go with upside sometimes when you're just projecting out these fights. And Aspinall's still young. He's still only 30 years of age. I think he could recover here from this injury. I think he's taken the requisite amount of time. But does that mean I'm rushing to the window to go lay this minus price? God, no, I am not. The reason I'm not doing that is because look at the context. We're dealing with a heavyweight fight. Inherently more volatility at heavyweight. Do I think that Marcin Tybura is going to knock out Tom Aspinall? No, I do not. And I think that the reason that the UFC put this together is because they do not fear that Marcin Tybura is going to knock out Tom Aspinall. But I will tell you a couple of interesting facts about this fight that I found when I was doing just a cursory amount of research, which was Tom Aspinall has been submitted in MMA. Our guy Marcin Tybura in many more fights against high-level guys, never been submitted in pro MMA. Very impressive feat, but he's been knocked out a bunch of times. Our guy Tom Aspinall never been knocked out in pro MMA, but he has been injury TKO'd. It was his last fight. So when you're talking about the volatility of an injury TKO in his very last fight, and now he's coming back here as a huge favorite, already that says to me it's a dog or pass situation purely on the money line. Does that mean that you can't look to play Tom Aspinall other ways? I don't think that that's a problem. I think you could do that. I think there may even be plus EV ways to play Tom Aspinall. I can tell you guys this. When I thought about this matchup, I said to myself, is Tom Aspinall going to buzz this guy on the feet and become the first man to submit Marcin Tybura in professional MMA? And I do think it's a possibility here because Marcin, he's normally going against these guys that are a similar age, right? That have been like age contemporaries and guys that have been way below him in skill level in this recent run. So there's definitely a world in which Tom Aspinall goes out there, hurts him with a knee to the body in the clinch, like he's known to do, like he did against Sergey Spivak, another talented wrestler, grappler, that Marcin Tybura went the full 15 minutes with. He gave him the tour of the octagon, as our guy, I think my guy Dan Levy likes to say that, best fight picks. But, the tour of the octagon indeed was the phrase there. But when you're looking at how Tom Aspinall treated him, he literally kneed him in the body, hit him with an elbow, and the fight was over shortly thereafter. So I think Tom Aspinall just has way more natural power than Marcin Tybura. So if somebody gets finished in the early going of this fight, I think it's going to be Marcin Tybura getting finished. And I also think that, except if there's a weird ass injury. Shout out to our guy Daz Files. That's the other thing is, projecting out Aspinall to win this fight at that high a clip, you're just inviting a little bit high volatility. And the bookmaker knows that people are going to want to play Aspinall here. So they're kind of making it an unplayable line, forcing you to put it into a parlay, things like this that are a little bit more on the negative EV side. So if you're gambling for entertainment, if you're betting for fun, anything like that, then go ahead and throw them on in the parlays and do all those things. But for me personally, guys, I don't believe in these kind of money lines at heavyweight, especially in a case where somebody's coming off an injury. Just seems like you're inviting a lot of volatility there. And it's also like, people are pretending this London backdrop is going to save them if Aspinall's on the parlay. But the thing is, against Curtis Blades, it was in London too. And the people went home happy from all the other beautiful London outcomes that they got on that fight night. And unfortunately for the Tom Aspinall thing, it was like letting the air out of a balloon. And we hope that Tom's okay here. But it's just to say that the UFC is trying to put him back in that same situation. But who's to say he doesn't throw a leg kick here and his knee gives out, and then the Marcin Tybura plus 360 better is like, yes, and again, it's a brutal, horrible sport at times. But when we're talking about betting dollars and cents, when a guy just injured himself and got surgery and he's going out there into a cage fight, that's always something that can cause you a re-injury, right? So we wish him the best. We don't ever hope for somebody to get injured. Good Lord willing, everybody's okay. But again, we're talking about betting money. We're talking about parting with dollars and cents, and it's important. So shout out to our guy Chris V with the first dono of the chat. Good luck this weekend. He says, appreciate you big time, my brother. Absolutely. Looking for some luck this weekend. Coming off that unlucky beat, I would say, on Mayra Buena Silva. She rocks Holly home and just easily locks up the ninja choke. I was hoping, Holly was going to offer just a little bit more resistance there. But shout out to our guy, Chris V. Truly greatly appreciated, my brother. So with that being said, my read here is that, in a world that is sensical, right? In the most logical, most likely outcome, I think that this is a first or second round finish for Aspinall. I wouldn't get too cute with the KO or the sub unless there's a really generous price. Because I'm telling you, I think that if he can, he will try to get that notch on his belt to be the first guy to sub Tybura. I think that would be a huge feather in his cap if he was able to accomplish that. So with that being said, I think the ends by sub prop could be interesting here as well. I shouldn't even be saying all this, but I'll give you guys the full goods because you guys are rocking with me live. 62 people rocking with us live. So yeah, that's another way I'm going to look at this fight, because I've seen Tom Aspinall get submitted and make some really weird choices on the ground, and we don't know exactly how he's going to feel coming back to this fight. So I would feel disgusted if I had the ends by sub and there was an injury, but I do also think it might be tremendous value because of recency bias. So I'm just going to wait and see what that prop is priced at. But a couple of things that I'll be taking a look at on the main event. And shout out to the people rocking with us live. Shout out to the people on Patreon who did see that about 7 hours ago as well, because that is something that I was looking at earlier. Next up, Molly McCann and Julija Stoliarenko in the co-main event of the evening. This is a co-main event of the evening because Molly McCann is from England, and she is going to bring the crowd to a raucous, thrilling uproar. And here's the other thing. This is a fight that, for me, the initial read was, Stoliarenko plus 280. I was like, man, that just doesn't feel right. That seems like it's way too wide, because I know that her sub 1 prop is going to be like plus 500. And the market has corrected that, right? Like it got slammed down. Now on the OddsJam plus EV screen, I'm seeing plus 195 is plus EV, when literally 2 or 3 days ago, plus 280 was a plus EV play on the screen as well. So you see some interesting market moves here. A lot of love coming in on Julija Stoliarenko, who is 1-5 in the UFC. It kind of reminds us a little bit of the Estela Nunes money line last week, where, she, and I don't mean to say anything about the outcome of that fight, which, prayers up to Estela Nunes. That was disgusting. I could not look at the screen. Rick the Ruler says, God, no, hope we avoid a freak injury on this card. Estela Nunes injury was disgusting. Absolutely true, Rick. So yeah, not wishing for any of that at all. But talking about this fight, Stoliarenko is a classic archetype in WMMA. She is the armbar or bust type of fighter. And you look at her record, it's very clear. She's won and lost split decisions. So she has 1 win by split decision. She's gone to a few close decisions, but really she's not a very effective fighter in any range except for, the clinch and when she is armbarring somebody, because even her grappling decisions outside of the arm bars are a little bit suspect. However, Julija Stoliarenko is a woman to whom I will always owe a supreme debt of gratitude. I'm bringing up her previous bet on record. I donated a quarter unit against Julia Avila when she got submitted in the 3rd round. I bet, a quarter unit there at plus 285. I bet 2.5 units on Julija Stoliarenko against Chelsea Chandler, which was a really dumb bet. But then you watch Chelsea Chandler last night on Saturday, and you say to yourself, you know what, Liam, I kind of get where you were coming from. She's very tough. She's not going to give up easily at all, but she does make some really suspect decisions, put herself in some bad situations. But in any case, I did also bet her for 2.35 units at plus 155 against Jessica Rose Clark. And that's the beauty of plus money, ladies and gentlemen. Still slightly up on Julija Stoliarenko bets as a result. But then looking at the prop market, I bet Alexis Davis 1.38 units at plus 105 to win by decision against Julija Stoliarenko, because a lot of women have beaten her by decision. And then I also bet Julija Stoliarenko by sub for half a unit plus 500, and for sub round 1, 0.15 units at plus 1,200 against Jessica Rose Clark. So we hit those very nicely, and then they are going to be nerfed in this fight because Molly McCann is coming off of a arm submission in round 1. You know that they're going to make sure that they cover their ass a little bit. The bookmaker was not born yesterday. So Julija Stoliarenko props are probably going to be really limited here. But my question was, is she the parlay buster? We've seen Molly McCann out-wrestled and out-grappled before in the UFC, so that's definitely not something that you could rule out. However, we've seen her go the full 15 minutes with Talia Santos as well, and with Lara Procopio, who is a black belt. Talia Santos, not a black belt, but very physically strong, nearly submitted Shevchenko. Should have cashed me that plus 400 ticket. They'll never live that down in my mind, but overall, you just look at the record, 10-7-1 for Julija Stoliarenko. She's really not that inspiring a fighter. Even the Chelsea Chandler loss looks really terrible in retrospect, the way that she went out there. This is a woman that has struggled, almost fallen off the scale, guys, at 135 pounds, and now she's going down to 125. Wouldn't be surprised if this fight gets canceled. Wouldn't be surprised if Stoliarenko does not make this fight. But if this fight does end up happening, I like the under. I like Molly by KO. I like Stoliarenko, sub 1 if it's a decent number. But basically, I think this fight is going to end violently because Stoliarenko does not like getting hit, and she does not like getting bullied, and she does not like getting pushed around. And I think all those things are live to happen here. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, like Stoliarenko definitely has the goods to submit her in the first round. Molly McCann's grappling's not that great, but she's tough. She's gritty. She's survived a couple decent grapplers as well. So I think that either one of these women has a chance to win violently. And I think in her last 4 fights, she's 3-4 to the under, talking about Molly McCann. And I think it's 2 of her last 3, talking about Stoliarenko here. So I like the under here at -130, kind of taking a look at that, but no bets for me yet. That was my lean on Patreon as well earlier today. I said gut read is Molly McCann KO. Fight goes under, but Julija sub 1 is live. So those are my opinions on that first fight of the evening. Or excuse me, the co-main event. Now let's move to the featured bout of the evening. Nathaniel Wood is taking on Andre Touchy Fili. Interesting nickname, huh? He's stuck around the UFC for a long damn time. Andre Fili, fan favorite type of guy. Been around for a while. Team alpha male fighter. Going to have a 5-inch reach advantage in this fight. That stands out on paper. 5-inch height advantage in this fight. That stands out on paper. So huge height and reach advantage on an underdog here. But he is also going to be 4 years older at the time of the fight. Wow, 90% of Tapology votes are on Nathaniel Wood. Holy smokes. Wow, that is a really high amount. God bless everybody. There's a lot of confidence there because, I lean towards Nathaniel Wood as well, but that Tapology thing gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'll tell you the truth. Let's talk about this fight. On the one hand, Nathaniel Wood, I can't always get this guy right. I've had a difficult time predicting his fights in the UFC. I thought that Jourdain was going to give him some trouble. He ended up doing much better than I expected there. Let's pull up Nathaniel Wood, his resume in the UFC. So overall, I'm down on Nathaniel Wood. That's the truth. Betting on this guy, I did well. I bet Casey Kenny against him in a couple parlays. I bet Casey Kenny straight up 2.5 units at -180. Profited there. And I thought that Casey Kenny had multiple paths to victory, striking in bursts, using cage control and opportunistic takedowns to win rounds and minutes. While I rate Wood highly as an opponent, I have faith in Kennedy's ability, activity, and strength to schedule. So basically, I was giving a lot of plaudits there to our guy, Nathaniel Wood, even when I was fading him with Casey Kenny. And now he's moved up to 145. He's 2-0 at 145 pounds. I tried to fade him with Charles Jourdain. I thought that they were setting up Jourdain to look good there after, he kind of got robbed a little bit. I had a big bet on Shane Burgos, so I have no incentive to say, but I kind of felt like it was a very close fight in any case. But overall, Charles Jourdain's just inability to deal with back control, things like that is a problem. But Nathaniel Wood beat his ass. He really hurt him with a bunch of shots, landed a bunch of clean strikes on him, and just looked great, looked fast, looked like he was able to move and operate really cleanly at range. So let me pull up on OddsJam right now this fight so we can talk about the current moneyline odds. We've got -200 is the going rate at DraftKings, -195, best available at Resorts World and PointsBet for the Nathaniel Wood side. You're looking at a +175 comeback on the underdog here, Andre Fili. Fili is a guy that, he's really struggled as a favorite in the UFC, funny enough. When you look at his history, a lot of the fights that I've taped, unfortunately for Andre Fili, he comes in as a favorite and he ends up losing, right? Like the Calvin Kattar fight, for example. I believe Calvin Kattar was +250 underdog in that fight. UFC debut. Andre Fili, big moment, big spot, defending, that UFC spot against this oncoming guy, and he got beat. 30-27, clean across the board. Shout out to our guy, Alex, says, drop a like on this video. Make sure you do that. Really appreciate when you guys do. Shows love out here at 12, a little bit after midnight. And we're just getting started, guys. A lot of fights still to break down. So God bless you for it. Appreciate it if you could drop a like here. But overall, we're looking at a fight between two featherweights here. One of them seems like he's coming on in the division, right? Nathaniel Wood definitely seems like he's coming on. But let's take a step back and look at what he's accomplished so far in the UFC. He has no knockout wins in the UFC. He has 3 submissions. However, they were in his first 3 fights. He has not gotten a finish since 2019. He beat John Castaneda by decision in 2020. He beat Charles Rosa by decision in 2022. And I mean, come on, man. He should have finished that fight. That was insane. And then he beat Charles Jourdain in September of 2022. So what is up with Nathaniel Wood? He's not been that active, right? He had a laceration that caused a cancellation, according to Tapology, for the Lerone Murphy fight. So I think that there's a lot to be said for, this being a little bit more competitive than the odds suggest. I just struggle to get there because when I look at Andre Fili's resume recently, let's talk about the recent resume of Andre Fili, because he's had a storied resume in the UFC. Let's look at his best win in the UFC. His best win in the UFC, oh God, it's almost hard to say looking over this resume, but what I would contend is that his best win in the UFC is Dennis Bermudez by split decision in 2018. Does anybody disagree with that? Is the Bill Aldio win better? I think that's fair. But overall, this is a guy who's known for losing in big fights. Let's list off the resume and, try not to be rude about it. Joanderson Brito. Guys, I bet Brito huge there. Brito is one of my favorite bets in a long time. Plus 250. I thought he was more dangerous on the feet. I thought he was more dangerous on the ground. And I thought he was the hungrier guy. He was younger. He was more explosive. I love Brito there. I bet him to win inside the distance at 10-1, and I bet him on the money line plus 250. So Andre dropped the ball there. He got finished in the first round, got knocked out. Everybody was commenting on my YouTube video telling me how he was he's the parlay lock of the week. Put Andre Fili in the parlays, and I was telling you, no, the parlay buster is Joanderson Brito, and that's exactly what he did. Got New York Rangers playoffs tickets as a result. So shout out to Joanderson Brito. Never forget, had a great memory with my father as a result of his impressive knockout there. So, then we look back at the Daniel Pineda fight. Daniel Pineda is a way older guy for the division. Fili, to his credit, stuffed the takedowns there, beat the absolute tar out of that guy on the feet, and then the fight ends up with a no contest due to an eye poke. So kind of a tough beat there, but he really was looking good in that fight. Probably, the best he's looked in a really long time. Prior to that, lost a unanimous decision where he got out-wrestled against Bryce Mitchell, did win 1 round there, did look competitive there, but was unable to ultimately seal the deal, get the win, dropped a co-main event there in an important opportunity. That was all the way back in 2020. Then in June of 2020, he got a split decision win over common opponent Charles Jourdain. So instead of the unanimous decision like Wood, it was a split decision. It was very close, contentious fight. Could have went either way. Sadiq Youssef, no shame there, right? Sadiq's a very good fighter, ranked fighter, got the loss there by unanimous decision back in January of 2020. So he was staying active. He was keeping in there, fighting a really tough schedule. But, you can't really take too much away from it. Beat Shaman Moraes, guy who's no longer with the company. Beat Miles Jury, good fighter, but no longer with the company, as far as I know. Michael Johnson, lost him by split decision. I mean, Michael Johnson is one of the least consistent fighters in the UFC. He lost to him in 2018 by split decision. Beat Dennis Bermudez, local Section 9 guy. Section 9 wrestling, stand the hell up. He is on the all-time win list for Socrates Wrestling Section 9. So God bless him for it. Dennis Bermudez, retired from the sport, still coaching wrestling, I think, doing his thing. So really talented guy from our local area, and I like to show that love. Not a lot of people talk about Dennis Bermudez. He's been in a lot of classic fights, fought a lot of the toughest guys at 145 when it was a meat grinder of a division, when Conor McGregor was ruling the roost. So this guy really, he stands out in my mind. And that's why I think he's arguably the best win of Andre Fili's career, and it was a really close fight. But then the Artem Lobov fight, I mean, what does that really tell you? Artem Lobov didn't really win fights in the UFC, not at a high level. And then, like I said, lost to Calvin Kattar. So my knowledge of Andre Fili basically goes from the Calvin Kattar fight on upwards, because I remember the other fights, but in terms of when I've been taking this stuff really seriously, it's been from that kind of point forward. So, the Yair Rodriguez loss, I remember way back in the day. This guy's tough. He's hard to finish. He hadn't been finished since that Yair Rodriguez fight. but he's now 33 years old in a division that eats these guys. And he's been around for so long, having all these tough fights in the UFC. And so eventually that bill starts to come due. Is Andre Fili going to take a step up towards that next level? I don't see it personally. I haven't seen it in his recent fights, and the only wins, like I said, in his last 5 fights are by split decision. The Bilal Gio win probably shouldn't have been a split, probably should have been a unanimous decision there. But still, went out there and it was a little bit closer. It was a little bit more within the bounds. And when he had the back, he could have done a little bit more to do damage to get to good position. So it was tough stuff. So wanted to shout out to the chat. My guy Herc, is giving me grief. Sold Albert Duraev and he got effed. I mean, absolutely, brother. I'm sorry. I went down swinging with you. Never give you advice that I don't take myself. And I thought Albert Duraev was going to win the fight. Overall, it was a square side. I try and bring on other sharp bettors as well, like my guy Pepe, who made a very strong case for Jin Young Park. But unfortunately, I always will tell you what I'm betting, and I was betting Albert Duraev. So I went down with the ship there. But in any case, up on the year, up on the last 3-4 events. So again, it's just one blip along the road, but I bet on underdogs, right? That's kind of what I do. I try and primarily focus on underdogs. One underdog won last week. I bet 2 dogs. It just kind of was what it was. And also, they changed the order of the card, man, which I always hate to see. I had bet Albert Duraev before they moved him out of that co-main event slot. I thought that the co-main event slot meant they were giving him a chance. They wanted to, put some promotional might behind him. And then they shag him not only out of that spot, but they don't even put him in the featured bout. So instead, that's what it is. But we can move back to these fights that we've got going on. My gut lean here was Nathaniel Wood by unanimous decision against Andre Fili. I think that they might scoop people on this fight, thinking that Nathaniel Wood's going to come out here and finally get the finish. I think people bet on Nathaniel Wood ITD props every time, but he's a guy that really just doesn't seem like he prioritizes the finish that much. And Andre Fili is a tough guy, very tough customer, not going to get put away unless you really hurt him and finish him. You got to follow up. You got to do a lot of damage. So I just don't see Nathaniel Wood necessarily doing that to him. He's only in his 3rd fight here at featherweight. Andre Fili, a very battle-tested guy at featherweight. And the guys that have finished him, Yair Rodriguez, Joe Anderson Brito, these are extremely explosive, dangerous fighters that can finish anybody in the weight class. So I don't think that, Nathaniel Wood's just going to become the most explosive finisher of all time. So I think we're going to see a close decision, contentious decision. But I think, Nathaniel Wood just does a little bit more that I'd want to see. So the size for Fili is going to be interesting here. It's going to be an interesting dynamic, but I like the combination striking that I've seen from Nathaniel Wood. And I just think he's a more talented fighter on the up and up right now. So it's kind of how I feel about it. But I wouldn't bet this price on Nathaniel Wood either, because it's a featherweight fight, because it's a pretty closely, contested fight. The one thing I do think is they might give him biased judging in England. Like, that is definitely something I think about in my back pocket here, because Nathaniel Wood is like a London product, trained at a Great Britain top team. So seems like an ideal candidate for some home cooking as well. And when you're seeing a guy like Andre Fili struggle to finish in all these fights, I just don't know if the judges are even going to give this guy a fair shake. So this seems like an ideal candidate for a pass. But my gut read was Nathaniel Wood via unanimous decision. So that's how I feel. Next up, really fun fight, really contentious fight, and a lot of unknowns, right? Paul Craig, the Bear Jew, Paul Craig, coming down to 185 pounds here for the first time in the UFC, and he's taking on Andre Sergipano Muniz. These are 2 guys that I really like. Right. Full disclosure, Andre Muniz has been my boy. He's been low-key my boy at 185 for a long time. I felt like on the way up, people were sleeping on him. And I felt like his jiu-jitsu was really high quality. And I felt like he was a dangerous guy who wasn't getting his plaudits. I'm looking at my Bet MMA sheet right now, and I have never missed on an Andre Muniz bet. I bet him against Fabinski. I bet him against Anders. And I had against Fabinski Muniz in round 1, Muniz by sub, Muniz ITD, and the under 2.5 rounds. So I've made just shy of 7 units profit, or maybe a little over 7 units profit. I don't want to take time away from the show to do the math, but essentially I've done very well betting on Andre Muniz, but I picked my spots as well. Against Brendan Allen, I didn't like that the fight got switched up, right? If you guys remember, it was supposed to be the Krylov-Spann event, and that got canceled short notice. Fight fizzled out. So then all of a sudden, Andre Muniz, Brendan Allen is a UFC main event. Craziness, right? And what I felt like in this fight was that the biggest unknown here is what Paul Craig looks like at 185 pounds, because Paul Craig, right? Paul Craig is a very good jiu-jitsu player. And I feel like that's normally an asset that he leverages over light heavyweights who are terrible at jiu-jitsu, right? Light heavyweight, by and large, is not a jiu-jitsu division. Heavyweight, by and large, not a jiu-jitsu division, right? John Jones goes out there and makes Cyril Gane look like a white belt in the first round. That's heavyweight. That's light heavyweight. Most guys are not very deep in their knowledge there. Guys like Josh Barnett, Fabricio Verdum can make a career of understanding submission grappling at heavyweight. And that's to give credit to the legends as well. It's hard to move your body like that. It's hard to do things in that way repetitively when you're a big fella. So all those things taken into consideration, I think Andre Muniz is a really dangerous fight for Paul Craig, because on the feet, Paul Craig is nothing special. He's a guy that's been making strides. He's been trying. He works really hard, but he's 35 years of age. Some of his habits are just ingrained. His defense is poor, right? On the feet, he just gets hit so cleanly, so easily. I thought that the Johnny Walker fight was a horrible, horrible look unless it got extended. Because if it gets extended, Paul Craig's a tough guy. He'll work his way into a fight, try and get on top. But he'll even gas out if things go sideways, like he did against Volkan Ozdemir. So I love Paul Craig. I think he's a fun guy. But at 185, I wonder if his durability will translate. His durability was not good at 205. I wonder if his cardio will translate. His cardio was shaky at times at 205. So maybe it'll be better at 185, but maybe the durability will suffer. There's a lot of unknowns here. So unknowns typically push the line closer to 50-50. And I honestly think that's what's happening here, because otherwise I think Andre Muniz would probably be a bigger favorite. The only reason I say that is just when Paul Craig's number one win condition is submission, it's difficult to imagine him submitting Andre Muniz when they're both fresh. But the thing is, we just saw somebody pace grapple Andre Muniz until he broke, and it was Brendan Allen. I just don't think that the same skill set that Brendan Allen has on the feet is present within Paul Craig, right? And I don't think that Paul Craig can necessarily work at the same pace rate that Brendan Allen did. So on all fronts, I think this is a really tough fight for Paul. It's not like Paul's undefeated in London. We've seen him lose in London before. So I think that the UFC is giving him a really tough first outing at 185. They're kind of finding out who's going to be the wrestler, grappler guy that sticks around, because Andre Muniz, I think, is a more well-rounded fighter than Paul Craig. I think his kickboxing is better, but his durability is not great. He's been knocked out a number of times in his career. That was always the big flaw with him, is that his cardio and his durability aren't great. So they're kind of giving these guys, they're very similar in archetype, right? Not the most durable, not the best cardio, but really dangerous submission grappler. So I think they're kind of trying to pair them off and see who's got the better, well-rounded skill set. And for me, I feel like Andre Muniz, when he's, sober at the beginning, right? Before he gets tired, before he's looks like the drunk uncle stumbling around, when he's not doing that, then our guy Andre Muniz is a little bit cleaner, in my opinion, with his kickboxing fundamentals and his Muay Thai. So I do think that he will probably land clean shots. And we have not seen Paul Craig do so good, if my memory serves, against Brazilians. He beat Shogun Rua, but he also went to a draw with Shogun Rua. And he got knocked out in the first round by Johnny Walker. He beat Vinicius Moreira, but Vinicius Moreira is one of the worst fighters in the history of the UFC, I think. I don't believe he won a fight in the UFC, if my memory serves. And he beat Luis Henrique da Silva, who was also not a very high-level UFC fighter. So, with all that being said, I look at this fight, and Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. My guy Pierce, very sharp individual, comes in and he says Muniz KO will be as sharp as Dudakova KO. Book it. Appreciate that you're tending to agree here. So this is a really interesting fight. I think that both guys have a lot to gain here, but the younger guy is Muniz, and I think Muniz kind of panicked in a big spot, a big situation there. Not unlike a Rodolfo Vieira. I think he's the more credentialed guy. I think if you put those two guys in a gi, maybe we see Brendan Allen get the win. But, I don't know. I look at this and I say more often than not, Andre Muniz should get the job done here. So earlier today on Patreon, I actually said gut read Andre Muniz defeats Paul Craig via round 1 finish. I didn't specify the KO or the sub because I think they're both live here. But I think the longer the fight goes, the more I would favor Paul Craig to find his way into it. I think he's got heart. I think he's got a lot of will and determination. And I think if he makes the sacrifice in the cut to 185, then he's going to have to do a ton of cardio. But I just don't see at 35 a change in weight class really being a move that pays off at a very high clip. Next up, guys, we've got a main card bout at lightweight between Jai Herbert and Fares Ziam. This seems to be the talk of the town. And speaking of, Big Bird says at least you can say Estella was the side. Absolutely. Absolutely you can. Chris V, another sharp guy in the chat, says, I think Muniz by KO since Craig is cutting to 185. I got Muniz by KO plus 800 prepared for the club and sub. That is always live, my brother. Just like our girl, Myra Buena Silva. I bet the KO plus 1,500, and I knew what was going to happen as soon as it happened, brother. She starts landing clean punches, and Holly Holm says, get me out of here, man. So I think that this is another interesting spot. I should just give you guys the odds here before we kick it over to the next fight. So let's talk about the odds for Andre Muniz. And the best available price that I'm seeing is minus 215 on Resorts World PointsBet, minus 220 on Caesars, next best available. Then you're looking at minus 226 on Pinnacle Sportsbook. So some decent looks out there to Pinnacle, but nothing crazy. On the Paul Craig side, you're seeing the best available comeback on DraftKings, plus 200. Plus 190 is a little bit more common. Plus 195 hanging at WinBet as well. So a lot of great people here dropping knowledge, but also a lot of great opportunities if you guys want to shop for different odds out there. Let's look at this fight and how it's lined. Fares Ziam, we're looking at a minus 155 favorite, minus 150 best available on Pinnacle, and you're looking at a plus 145 comeback on Jai Herbert. So almost a 0% negative synthetic hold. That's an interesting note right off the rip. So a lot of different opinions here in the market. Caesars as high as minus 170 plus 145, and then Pinnacle as low as minus 150 plus 130 on the comeback. And Bet Rivers is only offering plus 114 on the comeback. So Bet Rivers, customarily offering that 6% VIG. Just gross. But let's talk about the fight. Let's talk about the matchup. We got Jai Herbert, the Black Country Banger, 12-4-1, taking on Fares Ziam, 13-4. Fares Ziam got back on the winning track by beating Michael Figlak in his last fight. And honestly, I think Fares Ziam is being overvalued here. That's my personal opinion. Before I do my research, right? So maybe I do some research here and I find out that I'm wrong. But just like gut lean here is that Jai Herbert is a little bit of value here at plus 145. The reason I feel that way, when I look at Jai Herbert, he's a guy that's getting better on the ground, continuing to show growth in those skills, and hasn't looked completely out of place. He got submitted by Renato Moicano. I mean, really, what do you want to say about that? Renato Moicano is a high-level guy. No shame in that. No skin off your nose there. So I don't really discredit him for that loss. And then other than that, he lost to Ilia Topuria, who is an absolute murderer, Francisco Trinaldo in a fight he was winning. So Jai Herbert definitely has a questionable chin, and that's ultimately the biggest danger with playing him. That's ultimately the biggest concern when you're looking at Jai Herbert in any fight, really. But when you look at Ziam, he's a guy that has not yet won a fight by knockout in the UFC, if my memory serves. That's correct. I'll have to look at UFC stats. I think he's recorded a knockdown maybe. So he's got some power, some measure of power, but I don't think he's like the most murderous puncher. I don't think he's the best finisher in the world. And he's fought guys like Jamie Malarkey, been finished in the UFC, didn't finish him. He fought Luigi Vendramini, been finished in the UFC, didn't finish him, right? So it's just, we know that these are guys that can get finished, and Ziam's not going out there and finishing him. So if you're not going to go out there and finish Jai Herbert, I think Jai Herbert is, a guy that can kick you in the head, knock you the hell out. I think Jai Herbert's a guy that can take you down, mix it up a little bit on the ground. I think that Jai Herbert can throw long, strikes, and he can keep it at distance and box and do okay. So I don't think that Jai Herbert is out of place in this fight. I think that as long as he doesn't get knocked out, he's probably going to look like tremendous value. So, I haven't bet it, but my instincts say Jai Herbert is the side here. Ziam versus Jai is a fun scrap. The fans win, says YBB. Absolutely. Uncle Wheezy, shout out to Uncle Wheezy, one of my Pub Sports Radio brethren, says, I got the under 2.5 at plus 165 yesterday. Think there's a solid probability of a finish here. Have to agree with you, man. I think Jai Herbert, dangerous finisher. And I think Ziam, not the most dangerous finisher in the world, but if there's anybody you're going to finish, it's Jai Herbert, right? So I think that's definitely an interesting note. But I also think, the Ilia Topuria knockout can change your chin forever, right? Like some of these finishes that have been taken by Jai Herbert have been really serious and gross, so that's a little scary. Big Bird UFC says, you just don't fade the Black Country banger across the pond. Damn near almost beat the future 145-pound title challenger in London. You're damn right he did. Knocked him on his ass, and Josh Emmett had 5 rounds, couldn't accomplish the same thing. So the Black Country banger is just being disrespected here by the market. Ziam, young kid, 25, he's got that going for him, but these guys are the same size, and I think Jai Herbert is a better fighter. So, yeah, I'll probably be on Jai or passing on this fight. So the people that get it on me in the oh, damn, Matt, you did not get ignored, brother. I just missed it. We're getting blown up. We got a lot of comments. So my brother Herc, I ask you to pick your words sparingly, brother. There's so many comments that I can't see what everybody else had to say. So if I missed a comment, please go ahead and send it again. Be happy to answer any questions, comments, concerns that you guys have along the way. Stimmy OG says, yo, what it do, Liam? Wanted to shout out Stimmy OG, constant commenter on the show. So big appreciation for you. Matt R, throw that comment in the chat if you got something to say, brother. Would love to hear from you. Sigma Uchiba says, agreed. Herbert strength of schedule way stronger. Have to agree with you there, my brother. Good stuff. Herc says, got you, big dog. Appreciate you, Herc. All love, that. Just want to make sure everybody gets to get their say. And guys, if I ever see a dono come in, I'll drop whatever I'm doing and talk about what you want to talk about. So God bless you for it. But next up, let's talk about what's next on the schedule. Lerone Murphy taking on Josh Culibao at 145 pounds. Lerone Murphy, 12-0, 12-0-1, let's say. Coming off that somewhat controversial decision win over Gabriel Santos, it was a split decision. A lot of people feel like, maybe Gabriel Santos deserved the nod there. And that didn't age so great because Gabriel Santos in his next fight went out there and got absolutely flatlined by David Onama. So it's not like that's a terrible look, but it's just to say, Murphy is right on the edge with some of these guys that aren't even ranked at 145. The Makhmud Amirkhani win was very nice. Got the win there, but he looked like he was losing the first round pretty cleanly and decisively, and then he landed that huge knee and knocked him out. So did a great job, but, Makhmud Amirkhani is simply a one-round fighter. And he had a couple good positions there. Beat Douglas Silva de Andrade. That's a great win. Take nothing away from that. Douglas is a little bit older, a little bit past prime, but very good fighter. 26-3 at the time. Excellent win. Ricardo Ramos got the win there. Last time that he got a finish that wasn't named Makhmud Amirkhani was Ricardo Ramos. Way more athleticism, way more power, way more devastating. Good stuff. Good stuff from him there. Zubaira Tukhugov, the split draw. That was his UFC debut. And we've seen Zubaira Tukhugov, man, really you're looking to have a close fight with the guy. Most guys really don't get the finish they don't get to look good against Zubaira Tukhugov. So just going out there and getting a win of any kind, like our guy Elvis Bernier was able to do, it shows a lot about your character, and a lot about how tough you are, and a lot about what you could bring to the table. So the only guys that have ever gotten over on Zubaira Tukhugov have done it by split decision. Lerone Murphy going to a draw with him. I really don't take much away from that. I don't really hold that against him too much. So the question is, why is he so inactive? Why all the cancellations? The Wood cancellation is Wood's fault, but he withdrew from a scheduled bout against Nate the Train Landwehr. He had visa issues when he was supposed to fight Charles Air Jourdain. And he had an event canceled due to coronavirus with Gabriel Benitez. So he's had a bunch of cancellations. He's really struggled to get fully into this UFC rhythm. And he's 32 years of age, no spring chicken, especially for this weight class at 145. So it's time to S or get off the pot, if you know what I'm saying. For Lerone Murphy, he's got to take a real step forward. Josh Culibao, fun fighter. Guy that I've been betting for a while in the UFC. Let's pull up our previous bets on these guys. All right. Let's pull up our previous bets here. Josh Culibao. So I am undefeated on my Josh Culibao bets, folks. I've got, and listen very carefully to undefeated here, because I have a draw, a push, 0.8 units at plus 365 against Charles Air Jourdain. Josh Culibao went out there. I believe he recorded a knockdown in that fight, showed his power, showed his heart, showed his will, but unfortunately ended up letting Charles Jourdain come back on him, get the later rounds there. And this is what I had to say about Josh Culibao when he was coming into that fight against Charles Air Jourdain all the way back then. This is straight from my BetMMA.tips page. I think Josh Culibao is being undervalued on the money line because his last fight against Jalen Turner was a lot of one-way traffic, particularly because he was at a size and preparation disadvantage. I think Jourdain has shown himself to be quite hittable in the UFC, getting tagged and hurt briefly by Fili and dropped by Doo Ho Choi. I think that this fight should be fireworks, but given the stylistic matchup, I think Jourdain at minus 300 or so would be appropriate. Interesting note, this is Jourdain's first time as a favorite in the UFC, and he's priced in the minus 400 range. Not sure I see that. So the process hasn't changed very much for me over time. I look for these guys who are underpriced, who are underlooked, being given too generous a price as an underdog, and I look to hammer it. Because then Josh Culibao at plus 200 against Sung Woo Choi, he ends up fighting for my money like a freaking dog, staying tough, and going out there, landing big shots. And ultimately, Josh Culibao has just shown he's not a pushover against anybody in the UFC. Jalen Turner beat the hell out of him, but that was up a weight class. It was on super short notice. And since then, he hasn't been finished. He went the full 15 with Jourdain, went to a draw, got 3 straight wins since then. Now he's taking on a guy on home soil. I think the one, good note about Culibao is he went out there and he got the submission win in his last fight against Melsik Bagdasaryan. And maybe that'll open up that, finishing instinct for him. Maybe that will lead to more Josh Culibao finishes over time, because we've seen him land big shots. We've seen him hurt people, but he hasn't been able to put people away to this point. And I think that the better hardware is on the Murphy side. I think he's a more dynamic athlete. I think he's probably a guy who can hit a little bit harder even than Josh Culibao. But I think that Culibao moves more. I think he's got a lot of heart and toughness. I think he can fight hard for the full 15 minutes. So I think there's a lot of good things that Culibao brings to the table here. I think Murphy would be wise to try and wrestle this guy, get on top of him, try and wear on him a little bit that way. I think Lerone Murphy, physical guy, probably capable of doing that. So good fight, fun fight. Our guy Pierce says death taxes and Lerone Murphy being gifted decisions by the Brits. Shout out there. Rick the Ruler says, now this is a fight I'm excited for it. Matt R says, you didn't ignore me earlier. I was saying this to someone else in the chat. You good. Thanks for the content. By the way, do you have a Patreon? Matt, yes, I do. The link is down in the description below, but you could also search Liam Picks Fights Patreon, putting all my fighter notes on there, putting all my documents that I make throughout the week, UFC A-sides, talking about, basically my leans as soon as I have them, my reads, anything I bet, I write about why I bet it, put it all up there. So it's all kinds of in-depth information. You do not have to follow my bets. You can do your own thing. It is, I would say, elite research tools for MMA that I've cultivated over years of doing this. For my own personal resources, I basically am a nerd, right? I go through, I watch fights, I take really detailed notes. And so I have these archives of fighters. Some of them I haven't even looked at in a year or 2 years, but it was a fight I taped. It was a fight, that I had to tape for one fighter or another. And I just have all these Rolodexes of information where on this fight card alone, Ketlen Vieira, Marcin Tybura, Tom Aspinall, let's go look through the list of fighters that are on this card. Andre Muniz, Joel Alvarez. I'm talking about like 6+ pages of notes on each of these fighters, at least. 5+ pages of notes on Chris Duncan. I'm sure of that. I think I have notes on Johnny Parsons. I know I bet him on Contender Series. Josh Culibao I have notes on from pre-UFC. So it's not even just that I have notes all the time. It's that I have notes on things that happen pre-UFC. I have notes on things that happen for Contender Series fighter, all kinds of things. And all that stuff is up on the Patreon. So appreciate the support. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and throw them in the comments below here. Go ahead and get at me on social media at Liam Picks Fights. Happy to answer any questions for you guys, and also very receptive to messages on the Patreon as well. So if you guys message me on there, questions about fights, hey, do you have any tape on this? Happy to look for anything for you guys, and going to start getting future events up there as well soon. Shout out to Daz, my guy, constant supporter and listener of the show. Threw us the $5 dono. Truly appreciate you. And our guy, Matt R., for the $5 donos. Guys, every dollar goes a long way, and I truly, truly appreciate you guys for it. He says, thank you for the book recommendation, Logic of Sports Betting. Enjoying it, guys, right here. Logic of Sports Betting, Ed Miller, Matthew Davidow. Read and highlight. Learn. Take notes. It doesn't happen overnight, right? If you want to get good at something as complicated as betting, they say if you read books about betting, if you read books from casinos, they talk about the fact that there's about 3 to 9% of people that win, right? And most of the time, when you're talking about lifetime earners, you're talking about 1 to 3%, because most people don't find one market where they have an edge. Most people bet everything. And I'm not just talking about sports. Most people bet everything. They bet roulette, casino, whatever. So the house is a lifetime winner against you over time. That's the goal of the casino. So sports betting is one of the actual ways that you could beat the casino. It's one of the ways that you could beat the house. It has some of the lowest margins for the house. That's why most casinos don't like sports betting that much. They care much more about slot machines where they have a huge edge. They care much more about table games where they have a huge edge, where they can sell you the drinks, where they can do a lot more of that. Where I used to be the guy that casinos hate the most. I'd be showing up at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday to, drop $300 bets on a kiosk for MMA opener. So, there's different kinds of customers that gambling companies are appealing to. And as far as understanding the industry, the logic of sports betting is so, so critical. And I just encourage you guys, if you want to be winning bettors, it takes work, right? If you want to have fun, have fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to win, it takes a level of dedication. It takes a level of work, a level of effort, a level of thought. And so it took me a long time of developing all my skills. I had good skills in taking notes. I had good skills in martial arts. Like I had wrestled for 10 years and things like that. But I've been betting on MMA recreationally for fun since before it was legal for me to bet. But when we're talking about, taking it seriously, tracking my bets, I've been doing it now for over, 2.5, 3 years, basically, of taking it very seriously and tracking my information. So that's been my reality. You guys can go look. BetMMA.tips. You can find all my information. That's linked in the description below as well. So full transparency. You guys can go back and see when I was a losing sports bettor to when I was a winning sports bettor over time. And now 2 years in a row, tracked profitability, betting on MMA. And I've also, documented the reasons why. You guys can go back. There's videos I've done on this channel. You guys can find in the playlist section, the educational content where I talk about how I went from being a losing sports bettor to a winning sports bettor. It's not an accident, right? It didn't happen by mistake. It happened because I realized being a fan is one thing. being good at picking fights is another, right? I'm good at picking fights. I always was, but I wasn't good at betting on fights because betting is a skill. Betting on anything is a skill. If you guys want to bet on marbles, it's a skill. So I think that that's the number one thing that we could learn as gamblers is how we can approach MMA more like professional gamblers and less like MMA fans. Because when we're talking about being MMA fans, that's great. And when we're talking about who's going to win and why, that's great. And I like to do that as much as anybody in the space. You guys can always ask me, who do you think is going to win? Why? What do you think about their skills? What do you think about this guy's back take? Anything. I know those kind of minute details, and I like to talk about them. But when we're talking about making money, we also need to talk about markets. We need to talk about, data and information. We need to talk about stats. We need to talk about height, reach, and we need to talk about trends. If we're not talking about things that matter, then we're missing out. We're not having a high-level conversation. So always want to bring the best high-level information that I can bring to the table. So that's what I try and do. I try and incorporate every element, every aspect. We talk narratives. We talk how people look at the weigh-in, every single little minute detail you could think of, because if it can make a 1% difference in the handicap, well, then that could be the edge that you need to beat a bookmaker. It could be the edge you need to beat the market. So big blessings, guys. But remember, it ain't easy to win. If you want it, you got to earn it. So hope that I can be a resource for you both on this show. I come here, talk to you guys, give you guys a lot of my thoughts and opinions. But if you guys want to go that step deeper, there is that option on Patreon, and there'll be more content coming your way in the very near future. So Matt R makes a brilliant point here, guys. And this is the last thing we'll say before we move on to this next matchup. He says you could be terrible at picking fights and good at betting and still make money, but not the other way around. And that is a fact. Because if you do not understand the skills of money management and betting on any kind of outcomes, then you are simply going to put yourself in a position to fail. Risk of ruin. You got to understand that. You have to understand how much risk you're taking. So shout out to Matt R. Subscribe to the Patreon. I hope that you get tremendous value from it, brother. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure that you hit me and in the messages. Happy to get back to you ASAP. Shout out to our guy, Rick the Ruler. Quickly bumped that off the screen. My apologies, brother. Said, Liam, dropping that knowledge. Keep bringing the heat, bro. Appreciate you, my man. Always going to try and do that. Our guy, Herc MMA, says, when did you start betting MMA? I'm 10 months deep. My man, I am, 5, 6, 7+ years deep into this. I remember all the way back when I bet against my hero, Daniel Cormier, with John Jones, that vile bastard. But I knew that John was going to get the win there. So I had to do it. I had to bet against my own guy. It's a sadness hedge, they call that, right? Betting against something. So then if I lose the bet, if I lose the money, I'm still happy because Daniel Cormier gets the hand raised, but I just had a bad feeling, right? So I've been betting all the way since then on offshore accounts. But when you talk about serious betting, when you talk about, betting for money, betting to really try and win, betting, week to week, every UFC event on a serious structured basis, it's been a little over 3 years now. So thank you for the question. If you guys have more questions, go ahead and fire off in the chat. But in the meantime, let's talk about the next fight. We've got dangerous Davey Grant, very fun fighter, absolute banger, absolute action fighter. Believe this guy was running a pizza shop and just wanted to go all in with his MMA career. Really push the envelope. He's an older guy, but he's just found a way to make it work. So at 37 years of age, he's still running out there. He's still having gangster fights. He's still going out there and putting on an absolute show. You look at that Rafael Assunção fight last time out. Rafael Assunção, fresh off of beating Victor Henry. Very good win, very clean win for Rafael Assunção. Looked as good as he ever had, potentially, in that spot. And then he's going out there. He's putting on a great showing, landing good shots, having a good performance, and Davey Grant finds a way to submit him. Not only submit him, guys, put him all the way to sleep in round 3 there. Brutal, brutal finish. Davey Grant gets the win. And he's a guy who's always been fun to watch. The Smolka fight before that, brilliant, fun to watch, got the finish there. Lost the split decision to Adrian Yanez. Yanez just did a better job in that fight of blocking shots, rolling with shots, moving things off the shoulders, And Davey was very wide with his shots, and he likes to box primarily. He'll throw the leg kicks and stuff too. He'll throw the spinning kicks every once and again, the kicks up the middle. But a lot of times Davey's like in to throw the big loop-in shots with the long extended wrist. And sometimes that kills people, like it did against Jonathan Martinez, where he just randomly hits him on the chin and the guy goes night-night. But he went on a really good run as an underdog. He beat Grigory Popov as a plus 140, Martin Day as a plus 160, Jonathan Martinez as a plus 270. And then people were real bullish on him when he went into the rematch with Marlon Vera, myself included. I thought that Davey Grant could still have something for him. And Marlon Vera beat him within an inch of his life there. That was a brutal beatdown. So shout out to Marlon Vera there. Was not able to get the finish. This guy, Davey Grant, has not been finished since July of 2018. Extremely tough, dog tough guy. But he's been hurt. He's been dropped. He's been rocked. Even in fights that he won, the Martin Day fight, I think he got dropped in the first round, if my memory serves. So Davey's a fun guy. He's an awesome, fun banger. But I think this might be the time when it's a little bit too much, man. This guy, Daniel Marcos, coming in here, 30 years of age, Peruvian gentleman, got the win over Brandon Lewis on the Contender Series as a plus 147 dog, got the win over Simon Oliveira as a plus 125 underdog in his last fight at UFC 283, went to Brazil, finished the Brazilian via KO TKO. Now, am I, lighting the world on fire with a Simon Oliveira and a Brandon Lewis win? No, to tell you the truth, I'm not. But it's just about where they're at in their career. I think this guy, Daniel Marcos, is able to get into a brawl, stay tough, get in his face, bring the heat, bring the action. He's 14-0 as a professional, never lost. So Davey Grant, definitely more skilled, definitely a little bit more finesse. But at 37, with the style he has, always putting it on the line, just feels to me like this is a really dangerous fight for Davey. No pun intended there. I think Davey, good fighter, fun guy, brings the heat, brings the energy. But he's been high rolling a lot of big wins in the UFC. And I think that this is where maybe it comes back down to earth, because he was favored in his last two fights, albeit slightly, but now he's back to that underdog role and against a guy that people aren't as familiar with. So I think a lot of people are going to have Davey Grant plus money this week because he's a fun fighter, because he's a banger, because he brings the heat, because he fights hard for your dollar. And those are all good reasons. But I just have a sneaky feeling that the sharp play here is Daniel Marcos. I think that Daniel Marcos, really good, spirited effort his last two fights. I think that this is a guy who's going to bring the heat, the intensity every time out. And I think he's going to be looking for a UFC finish here against Davey Grant, an established guy, a really dangerous fighter to his credit. But I think that this is Daniel Marcos maybe having a coming out party overseas here against a very fun fighter in Davey Grant. So should be a slobber knocker, should be a banger. No bet for me here, because I do not want to lay the chalk against Davey Grant either. But just my gut's telling me Daniel Marcos is going to get his 15th career win here. Next up, guys, Jonny Parsons. Is this his UFC debut? Did I forget a UFC debutant? I absolutely did, guys. I got to go back and revise my tweet. Tweeted out just before this. We had 3 debutants. I'm wrong. We've got another debutant here in Jonny Parsons. And guys, he fought on the 2021 Contender Series. So this is a guy who's been, waiting in the chute for quite some time. Jonny Parsons, I believe he is the striking coach at Syndicate MMA, one of the striking coaches over at Syndicate. Currently on a 5-fight win streak, and that includes a win via split decision last time out against Solomon Renfro. Solomon Renfro, local fighter, very good fighter, just got a massive win in his last fight via knockout against the Jordanian Lion, I think. The Jordanian Lion, Jara Hussein Al-Salawi, handed him his 6th professional loss there in PFL. Huge win for our guy Solomon Renfro. So got back on track, but you will remember, guys, Mike Malott finished Solomon Renfro. Adam Fugit finished Solomon Renfro. And Jonny Parsons defeated Solomon Renfro via split decision. So he's dropped a couple of these really higher level fights on his resume. And when you're looking at this kind of fight, man, I think that, Jonny Parsons been on the shelf. There's a lot of question marks about him. He's not very active, hasn't had all that much experience. He had 2 fights in 2020, 2 fights in 2021, and he had a canceled bout in February of 2022 because he withdrew. And guys, you know that he had to have been really messed up to withdraw from a fight with Michael Gilmore, because I think he would have absolutely smoked Michael Gilmore. That would have been a max bet for me. Michael Gilmore, pretty fade-worthy guy in the UFC, all things considered, out of Murcielago MMA. Nice enough guy, tough guy. Seems like he brings the heat, brings the energy, but just didn't seem like he was cut out for the UFC coming off The Ultimate Fighter, I believe. And in this case, he's taking on Danny Roberts. And the interesting thing is Danny Roberts is definitely a talented fighter. But he's also a guy that's really been a letdown, in my view, in the UFC. Now he's staring down the barrel of 36 years of age. Recently turned 36. So just about 35, 36. And he got finished by Jack Della in his last fight. He was defeated soundly by Francisco Trinaldo, who is ancient, in his last fight. He beat Ramazan Emeev by split decision. And Ramazan Emeev, I believe, has fallen on hard times in the UFC. 2 straight losses in a row. His wins were by split decision against David Zawada and unanimous decision against Stoltze and Sekulic. So really not saying too much there positively for our guy Emeev. He beat Zelim Imadaev via knockout in round 2. He got knocked out in the first round by Michel Pereira in 2019. He got submitted in the third round by Claudio Silva, which I have to rewatch because my guy Moyes said to rewatch it. But if you're getting submitted in the third round by Claudio Silva, you need to probably change careers because Claudio Silva is a notorious gasser. And then he beat David Zawada by split decision, Oliver Enkamp by punches. Now, guys, notice I've said a lot of wins for Danny Roberts in the UFC. Which one stands out as a great win? He has a split decision win over Ramazan Emeev, and I would argue that is far and away his best win in the UFC. His other UFC wins, I'm going to list them all off sequentially. Nathan Coy, Dominique Steele, Bobby Nash, Oliver Enkamp, David Zawada, Zelim Imadaev, and Ramazan Emeev. It's impressive that he's gotten 7 UFC wins, but none of those guys are really like standout UFC guys. He's just a guy who's kind of clung around, hung on to a UFC spot, and I don't really make much of him. The truth is, guys, I bet Johnny Parsons against Solomon Renfro several times. Let me bring up the previous bets on these fighters. So Johnny Parsons, guys, I bet 1.5 units on Johnny Parsons at plus 260 because I said to myself, Johnny Parsons is going to make this an honest fight. One thing I had noticed on Contender Series is it's a trend. It's an angle for Contender Series that you guys could try if you want. Or fade it if you want. If you think I'm stupid, that's fine too. But one thing that I had done was coaches against guys that were young, like up and coming fighters. Have you guys ever been to a gym? You ever trained, right? You ever seen a coach go with somebody in the room? They normally mop them, right? The coach mops them. And it's because of a respect thing. It's because of a, experience thing. It's because of a technique thing. It's because of all kinds of things, right? Like the coach normally gets the better of the young up and coming student until eventually the changing of the guard, right? And I think that for Johnny Parsons, it was kind of the same thing. Solomon Renfro, he's still a guy who's on the come up. He's still a young kid learning the ropes from guys in the gym. And Johnny Parsons is a guy who's teaching. He's a guy who's on the other end of it a little bit. He's a guy who can kind of see both ends of the game. So I don't think that Johnny Parsons is like the world's most lights out fighter. I don't think he's even you look at the losses on his record. In 2019, he lost a unanimous decision to Chris Cisneros. Who the hell is that? He lost via right hook knockout to David Gladoon in 2018. So is he, this completely well-rounded, perfect fighter? No, I don't think that. But I think that Danny Roberts is chinny. I think that Danny Roberts doesn't have a great, future in the sport. Right? Like I don't expect him to have much more longevity at the UFC level. He's like a 500 type UFC guy, but really I think that his durability is starting to go and his confidence is potentially slipping a little bit as well. 2-3 in his last 5 fights. And on the other side, Johnny Parsons on a 5-fight win streak. He's had a lot of time to rest and recover between fights. So if he comes in here healthy and looking like a normal version of himself, I think that Johnny Parsons is going to knock Danny Roberts the hell out. That's truly how I feel. And that's how I felt from when I heard this matchup announced. Looking at the Tapology predictions, 66% of voters are on the Roberts side. So this is probably, I hope that they get to the betting window, and we'll see what's up. Because if Johnny Parsons looks good on the scale and he makes it to the fight, probably going to try and hope that he sees dog money and take him, because I think Johnny Parsons will win. And I think he's going to knock him out, as a matter of fact. Not the most bullish take, but that's how I feel. So I'm always going to share with you guys how I feel. And I like Johnny Parsons in that one. I bet him. I forgot to finish the deal there, guys. I bet him 1.5 units at plus 260, 1 unit at plus 310, and 0.25 units at plus 330. Sometimes you got to respect the market. Sometimes you got to tell the market to go F itself. And if the market is moving in a direction you strongly disagree with, that's the reason why you pick a number, right? You find an entry point that you could agree with. You say, I think plus 250 is value. So I see a plus 260. All right, I want to lock that in. I think it's value enough to take it for this much. Then if the number gets better in my favor, I could always add to it. But if the number gets worse and contracts and shrinks and the market agrees with me, I can't go back and say, no, give me back the plus 260. So that's the kind of thing where understanding where your entry points are is part of gambling. And my entry point there was plus 250. They gave me a plus 330. I had to add a little bit there more. But I also had half unit on props there. I had Johnny Parsons ITD for a quarter unit, and I had Johnny Parsons plus 2,000 to win by sub for a quarter unit. So there was my donations on that fight. Didn't look like he had a hope nor prayer of finishing there. But I do think that Johnny Parsons hits very hard, throws in good combination, and I don't think Danny Roberts takes a good punch. So I think that he could hurt him. I think he could club and sub him. All of that I think is live, but I think it's most likely he wins the fight by knockout or decision. Next up, 155-pound prelim fight. We got Joel Alvarez taking on Mark Diakiese, the Bone Crusher. And this is another, UK-based fighter. I believe another guy out of Great Britain top team in Mark Diakiese. And, he lost his last fight as a big favorite to Michael Johnson. That's a real mark of shame at this point in your UFC career when you're the younger guy, when you've had some UFC experience under your belt, and you go out there and you're doing the showboat and the bullshit, and you don't go get the win against somebody like Michael Johnson, who has proven to still have some chin issues at this point in his career, who's proven to drop a lot of close winnable fights in his career to get submitted as well. So Mark Diakiese really just not a guy who's been impressing me. The Damir Hadzovic win, Damir Hadzovic, a guy who's not very good, not a guy who's had a lot of success at the UFC level. 14-7 record overall, 4-5 in the UFC. Best win was against Yancy Medeiros. I mean, I'm not going to say too much more on that. He lost to Borishev. No real, skin off his nose there. He didn't get knocked, he beat Borishev. But he literally did nothing in that fight. I was there live. That fight was the most boring fight of all time. Could have taken a nap during that fight. He just took him down. Slava had no answers. Slava was really boring there too. So yeah, that was a terrible fight. He got kicked in the groin, I think, by Rafael Alves, but then he got easily submitted as well by the guillotine choke. That's a huge liability coming into a matchup like this. He got beat pretty cleanly by Fiziev as well. Fiziev slowed down a little bit in that fight, but was able to pretty easily just outstrike, outpoint Mark Diakiese on the feet there. Beat Lando Venata in that fight. Not really a huge takeaway from me there. Beat Joe Duffy. Joe Duffy was kind of on the bad end of his career there. Kind of was starting to think about exiting the sport. Lost to Nasrat Haqparast. Not very competitive. Got really beat up in that fight. Showed he didn't really know how to deal with somebody that could box. He got submitted as well with a guillotine choke by Dan Hooker. So you see kind of a pattern here as well. When he's going against these longer, taller guys that are really dangerous in the grappling, tended to struggle a little bit. Obviously getting the win against Joe Duffy's okay, but Joe Duffy's wrestling was poor. His grappling's okay. But Drakkar Klose, he lost a split decision there. So you see, overall, he's normally competitive with guys, but Mark Diakiese is just capable of losing a lot of decisions, dropping rounds, making boneheaded decisions. And then the win against Teemu Packalén, I think, really led to people overrating him a little bit. I mean, Teemu Packalén, kind of just a punching bag, hasn't fought since the Azaitar loss, and Azaitar, he's kind of been exposed now as a fraud as well. With all due respect, let me take that back. He's been, he's been caught. He's been hit on the chin. He's had a tough time. Nobody come kill me. It's all good. We're all friends here. In any case, we're looking at this fight, and I'm saying to myself, look, Mark Diakiese, not a guy I can really trust in the UFC these days. 7-6 record overall, 30 years of age. So he could still come on. He could still make improvements. He's still a guy who I think could make, significant improvements fight over fight. But now let's talk about his opponent here, Joel Alvarez, a guy who I've been really impressed by in the UFC. And his last fight out, guys, he got absolutely tortured, right? He just got absolutely beat to shreds. But frankly, I thought that was eminently predictable, right? When you got a guy with 0% takedown defense against Arman Tsarukyan, that's going to be a really bad recipe because Arman's going to get on top, and top guys win in MMA more often than not. So it's not to say that he had no chance in that fight, but I just thought to myself, that was a really, really big step up in competition, but also just a terrible stylistic matchup. So I bet Arman Tsarukyan -200. You guys know me. I'm not a huge chalk better, but when I think that there's an edge, I will bet it. And I bet Arman Tsarukyan for 5 units against Joel Alvarez. I bet, what's it called? Here, let me bring up Joel Alvarez betting history. So, yeah, I bet 5 units there. And then I bet Arman Tsarukyan ITD as well. I bet 1.5 units on Arman ITD at +175. So overall, my read on this fight was that, Arman was a nightmare matchup that was going to make him look bad. And that's what happened. So I don't really hold that against Joel Alvarez, right? He performed exactly to my expectations. He got beat up by a guy. He fought hard. He tried to stay tough. He was bleeding all in his eyes, right? Like there was no real answers there. He got taken down. He got his guard passed, and the guy was beating him up. It just was what it was. But I don't think that really downgrades his stock. He also lost to Demiris Magulov back in the day. He got out-jabbed. That was his UFC debut. I mean, do I hold that against him? I mean, no, not really. Got out-jabbed by a guy who's real good. Couldn't take him down. The guy could match him in terms of length. So, yeah, I really hated, that matchup for him. Tough sailing. He beat Danilo Belluardo. Absolutely smoked that guy. Out-wrestled him, outstruck him. Joe Duffy submitted him. That was a really good win. Joe Duffy, like I said, maybe on the back half of his career there, but to submit Joe Duffy, impressive stuff in my view. Joe Duffy submitted Conor McGregor. People that don't know MMA history will be surprised to hear that, but that's true. So Joe Duffy actually can grapple. Alexander Yakovlev, the Russian rapper, he submitted him as well in the first round, showed off his prolific submission game. And then the coming out party was the Thiago Moises win, the knockout win. KO round 1, TKO, I suppose, standing. But Thiago Moises was a bloody mess. He looked a lot like Arman Tsarukyan made Joel Alvarez look, right? Bleeding all over the face, in dire straits, and really uncomfortable. And Thiago Moises sometimes a slow starter. So Michael Johnson, when he had a slow start against Michael Johnson almost 10-8'd him. And then he went out there and got submitted in the, early going of the next round. Joel Alvarez, Moises didn't have that bailout option. He couldn't take him down. He couldn't get away from the big damage. So he got finished there. But I think that when you look at Joel Alvarez in this fight, he's the much more dangerous fighter. I think he's more dangerous on the feet. I think he's more dangerous on the ground. I don't think Mark Diakiese is not dangerous on the feet. He's done 2-touch kicks. He's done a lot of cool things. Spinning stuff, big elbows, big knees. But honestly, I think Joel Alvarez can compete with him in those ranges, for sure. So I think there's a little bit of bullishness publicly on the Joel Alvarez side. Let's look at the Tapology votes, get a little perspective here. Yeah, 88% on Alvarez. So that makes me want to pause for the cause, not just go, bet the money line or something like that. Seems like a lot of people here like the Alvarez side, but honestly, Mark Diakiese just hasn't inspired me with his performances in the UFC, and I think this guy's more dangerous. So betting the more dangerous fighter, I think, is normally a long-term good play, and I just wouldn't be surprised at all if Joel Alvarez wins this fight, wins it by finish. So I like Joel Alvarez. Next up, the one thing I'll say before we move off this fight, me and my guy Jewish Better have been talking about this in the DMs a little bit, and Mark Diakiese does have a wrestling path. if he can replicate some of the takedowns of Arman Tsarukyan and not get submitted, then he'd look probably like a hindsight favorite. But the problem for me, oh my God, what a pull. What a pull. Nandalal Rasaya. I hope I said that right, my brother. If I didn't, please correct me. But Yakovlev, the real G and a G. Absolutely, my man. That's such a great pull. If you guys want to go cringe and laugh and do whatever else, go look up G and a G. But in any case, guys, we can move to the next one here. With the knowledge that Mark Diakiese could implement a wrestling path here. Matt R says his best path is to stay on the feet. I do think that that's a decent path for him here, but I think Alvarez could also hurt him on the feet. So I think if it's on the feet, it'll be a very competitive fight. But I also think that, when I look at these two guys, I just think the tougher guy is Joel Alvarez, truthfully. So that's why I think he could outlast him maybe on the feet. But it's a great fight, well-matched fight. Let's pull up the odds for this one as well. Let's pull up the odds for Joel Alvarez here and Mark Diakiese. So right now, you're looking at best available odds, minus 180. That's on multiple sports books. You're looking at the best available comeback on Pinnacle, plus 170 on Mark Diakiese. So they've got minus 200 on Pinnacle on Joel Alvarez. So sign of strength there for Alvarez. But in any case, we can move along to the next fight here. Mick Parkin taking on Jamal Pogues at 265 pounds. We'll take a swig of coffee. Little pause for the cause. Last thing I'll mention about that last matchup while I'm thinking about it, I do have on that matchup over 16 pages of notes, and that's just a random lightweight prelim. But Joel Alvarez is a guy that I've taped everything. I want to say from the Thiago Moises fight and prior. I taped everything in the UFC and also some of his regional footage. And Mark Diakiese, he's had a ton of UFC fights. So I've taped a Hooker fight. I taped a bunch of fights basically in like a range of his career. Haven't gotten the Johnson fight in some of the newest fights, but over 15 pages of notes just on a random lightweight prelim. So hope that's an indication of the kind of detail and information that you get on the Patreon. But in any case, Mick Parkin taking on Jamal Pogues here. These are two guys I got to do more research on. What I know about Mick Parkin, he trains with Tom Aspinall. He trains with Philip DeFree, the guy who just got the win over the weekend in the regional scene. So these are guys where they're getting in good work with UFC level fighters. You like to see that. Probably getting in the best training they could get in their region of the world. You like to see that. This is a guy that's coming in with a 12-fight winning streak with a 6-0 undefeated professional record in Mick Parkin, and he's an underdog. So that's very interesting. Let's fix the hat, get it backwards, and get it rolling. Shout out to my guy, YBB. Very, very sharp guy. Says Alvarez is an auto bet when he weighs in 158.5. Shout out, brother. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, right? And this guy, Alvarez, known to show very big, huge guy for the division. We talk about Jalen Turner, some of these guys, 6'3" at lightweight. This is another guy who's massive for the division. And Joel Alvarez, length, height, all those things. So great point there from our guy YBB. Anything that you guys want to say on this Mick Parkin and Jamal Pogues matchup, go ahead and fire away as well. Let's talk about some of the measurables here. Mick Parkin going to be 1 inch taller here at 6'4". He's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. And these guys are the same age here, 27 years of age on both sides. Jamal Pogues coming on a 3-fight win streak. He has losses in his career inside the distance, but all of them are to fairly reasonable levels of competition. So Pogues' 3 losses are to Taylor Johnson, a guy who fought on the Contender Series, via KO in his very first fight, his professional debut. He lost to Jordan Young, God rest his soul, gentleman who unfortunately passed away far too young, but a really good fighter in his day. What submitted him in the 3rd round there in Bellator. And then additionally in the LFA, he lost via knockout, via heel hook in the 4th round against Alex Polizzi in a competitive fight. So Jamal Pogues, no slouch, right? Very talented guy. And he's a guy who's bounced around in weight. The Polizzi fight was at light heavyweight, 205 pounds. This Mick Parkin fight is going to be a heavyweight. So my questions here are, can Mick Parkin get takedowns and stay on top? Can he create those kind of situations and opportunities? Because you see on the record of Mick Parkin, he's got 5 wins by KO, TKO, 1 win by submission, including his last fight on Contender Series. So that was a point for me where, great comment from our guy John Valentine says, this is a go take a shit and make a sandwich kind of fight. Fair play by you, my man. These are two lower level heavyweights, guys that haven't proven it yet. But you got the local market guy who could get a greasy nod if it goes to the cards. And he's got a bunch of finishes on his record. So I got to do more research here. I tend to favor Americans overall. Just if I knew nothing else about him, I'm an American versus a Brit, tend to favor an American just based on the level of competition you see on the American regional scene. But I want to give, full due diligence here to the Mick Parkin side because he is training with world-class guys. So the idea that he couldn't be world-class is beyond me. But, winning against Eduardo Neves on Contender Series doesn't really tell me much either. So I'm going to have to dive deeper here and really get to know these fighters a little bit better before I bet. SD Crusader says Pogues is so bad. Should have lost to Parisian. Only get into the UFC because he was sobbing so much after his underwhelming win on Contender Series. He definitely had an underwhelming win on Contender Series against Paulo Renato Jr. The Josh Parisian win, I don't really hold that against him too much. I felt like he kind of just didn't pour it on there, but I did think that he did win the fight pretty cleanly. Shout out to City Travel Highlights. Says 7 a.m. here on my way to work. This stream is just what I needed. Nothing makes me happier than to hear that, brother. So let's get your day started off right. We're keeping it positive. We're keeping the energy rolling. And we got a lot of great fights still to talk about here. So no reason to worry. We will move on from this slop fest. I don't have the strongest opinion here on this fight, but it does feel like a kind of dog or pass situation to me. But I also have some sharp guys I respect who have taken early action on Pogues. So I'm going to wait and see here. Pogues does have twice the professional experience, has fought in the higher level shows, the Bellators, the LFAs around the scene, whereas this guy, Mick Parkin on the other side, is really taking a big step up here, also making his UFC debut. We see guys have jitters all the time. So shout out to our guy, Matt R. makes a great point. Neves has been killing it in the LFA, though. So that tells you maybe that win is aging gracefully and telling us something about what Mick Parkin could project to be in the UFC. So YBB, very sharp analysis, says, agree, Pogues, underwhelming, even in winning efforts. I have to agree with you there. So shout out to the chat, guys. So many sharp people in here dropping knowledge. Toast Bet says, I think the size and tools of Alvarez won't allow Diakiese to win minutes on top. I tend to agree, man. He's a dangerous guy from on bottom. And I do think that, Mark Diakiese has just shown he makes mistakes in the grappling. He's susceptible to being guillotined. Joel Alvarez has a nasty guillotine, nasty triangle, nasty armbar. He's just a disgusting grappler from the bottom position. And unless you're Arman Sarukian and your passing and your positional awareness is elite, then you're going to have a really hard time managing that guy's guard. So I think that people, will be reminded on Saturday of Joel Alvarez's strengths, but also, he's coming back off a little bit of a layoff. He did get a real ass whooping in his last fight, so could see a slightly more tentative version, but I doubt it. He seems like a guy who fights with much bravado and machismo, if you will. So shout out to Rick the Ruler, says, low-level heavyweight fight. Don't have to try too hard to talk me into a shot on the dog. Hear you there, brother. Hear you there. Next up, Bryan Barberena taking on Makhmud Muradov at 185 pounds. And speaking about, you don't have to talk me into a shot on the dog, they're running a pretty wide line here, I feel like, on this fight. Let's close the conversation on Pogues and Parkin by just mentioning real quick that we're seeing plus 130 on the comeback for Michael Parkin, minus 150 on DraftKings for Jamal Pogues. But now let's move to this next fight because Makhmud Muradov, sitting at a market average minus 313 according to OddsJam, looking at minus 300, best available price at Resorts World, Caesars, PointsBet, plus 255, the best comeback on Bryan Barberena on U.S. domestics, whereas you're getting a plus 261 on Pinnacle Sportsbook. I'm going to tell you guys my honest opinion here. I think that this line is a little busted. I think Makhmud Muradov is fraudulent. I think that if he didn't have the money team's endorsement, he would not be getting the plaudits that he gets in the UFC. Let's go back and talk about his actual resume in the UFC. He is 3-2 overall. He lost to Caio Barajo via decision. And that one I don't really hold too much against him because the truth is, Caio Barajo is a really good fighter. So that one I'll almost give him a break for. Gerald Meerschaert, great fighter. But if you're a big prospect in the UFC, you have to be beating Gerald Meerschaert, right? Look at how other prospects have treated Gerald Meerschaert along the way. Let's just look. Joe Pyfer, knockout in round 1. Gerald Meerschaert beat Bruno Silva via guillotine choke. He lost to Krzysztof Jotko, of all people, via decision. He beat Dustin Stoltzfus, Makhmud Muradov, Bartosz Fabinski. Kianzad Chimaev, knockout via one punch in the first round. Ian Heinisch, knockout in the first round. That might be Ian Heinisch's only career knockout. I'm half kidding, but still. Lost via split decision to Eric Anders. That one was kind of horseshit. Lost via split decision to Kevin Holland. Got outworked there by a younger guy. Lost via sub in round 1 to Jack Hermanson. Lost via KO round 2 to Thiago Santos. So you can finish Gerald Meerschaert. If you're a really dangerous prospect, that's what you go out there and do. And you know what he did? He went out there. He tried to finish Gerald Meerschaert. He tried to land a bunch of big shots. He underestimated the striking. He ate a bunch of big body kicks like a lot of guys do against Gerald Meerschaert. And then he got beat up. So ultimately, I think Makhmud Muradov is just not very defensively sound. And I don't think he's that dangerous as a striker as he's made out to be. Because let's go look at his record, okay? Let's look at his record here. He beat Andrew Sanchez via TKO round 3. Guys, Andrew Sanchez, if he's in round 3, is liable to be knocked out by anybody. Trust me. Go watch his career. He's liable to be finished by anybody in round 3. It's the story of his career. He can never fix that problem about his game. So it's no disrespect, but Andrew Sanchez is just not a 15-minute fighter. He just isn't. Trevor Smith finished him via round 3 knockout. Have y'all ever heard of Trevor Smith? All right, good. Me neither. I'm half kidding, but still, guys. Again, let's just be fair about where these guys are. Not a UFC level guy, 15-9 overall, hasn't been seen or heard from since in the UFC. Alessio Di Chirico, 12-3 at the time, got the win over him. That was a good win. That was probably the best win by him in the UFC. So his best win in the UFC was in 2019, and it was a decision. He's had to go almost a full 15 minutes every time. He does seem like a guy who slows down over the course of his fights. He could be hurt. He could be rocked on the feet. I just am not really sold on this guy as a big favorite, as a minus 300. He's minus 700 at close. The market was like, I'm in love with this guy. And then he gets finished by Gerald Meerschaert. I was at the casino live for that one, guys. I hate to tell you, a lot of people were not very happy. They were ripping up tickets. They were angry. They were yelling. They were screaming. And me and my boy were the only two jumping up and down with our plus 550 ITDs on Gerald Meerschaert and everything else. So overall, I just think that Makhmud Muradov, fun guy, brings a fun style, the bouncing, the striking, he's got fun energy out there. But I just really don't believe in his game. He's going to have a 3.5-inch reach advantage here, 2-inch height advantage. He's 1 year younger. But I think Bryan Barberena is the more tested UFC guy. You look at his losses. He lost to Gunnar Nelson via sub, RDA via sub. Those are elite black belts. All right. Makhmud Muradov ain't that. So unless you're going to, knock him out, Bryan Barberena is going to be in your face for 15 minutes trying to bring the pressure, bring the power, bring the pace, and make you work. And so I don't think Bryan Barberena is like a, lights out world's best UFC fighter, but I think he's value at plus 250 in a fight like this. I absolutely do. I do not think there's anything that makes Makhmud Muradov that significant a favorite. I do not think he can keep pace with Bryan Barberena for 15 minutes at all, period. So yeah, I like Bryan Barberena. And I honestly, I would probably pick, if you put a gun to my head, I would probably pick Makhmud Muradov. But again, if I'm going to write my article this week, and I'll be surprised if I don't get the Bryan Barberena as my article pick, just because there's something about contrarianism and me not liking this Makhmud Muradov guy getting too much love and respect for no reason. So both these guys coming off 2 straight losses, but you look at Muradov and his losses are to Gerald Meerschaert and Caio Barajo, and they both beat him in very different ways. Caio Barajo kind of systemic, patient out grappling from the back and wasn't able to get the finish there, but Caio Barajo hasn't been that dynamic a finisher from the back yet in the UFC. And then the other fight, he got finished by getting hurt and getting club and sub by Gerald Meerschaert. So I think that Bryan Barberena could definitely hurt this guy. It's a matter of who gets off with their big shots, and is Makhmud Muradov able to push it for 15? Until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. So both these guys, a lot of career losses. I don't think one of them, sets themselves apart much from the other. I think it's going to be a close fight. Next up, let's talk about Ketlen Vieira taking on Pannie Kianzad. This is another fight where all the Tapology voters are going with Ketlen Vieira here. And Ketlen Vieira has been my girl, right, in the UFC. Felt like she was ready to break out at 135 pounds. I felt like they were in need of a new contender. I felt like she was somebody that could maybe challenge Amanda Nunes. And now, having rewatched her most recent fight, I think there's no way she would have challenged Amanda Nunes. But I also think, it's very arguable whether Raquel Pennington won that fight. I thought Ketlen Vieira probably deserved the nod. I know that the sports books needed Raquel Pennington. Take that for whatever it's worth. Raquel Pennington gets the split, very close. So I think that there's a lot to dig into here. Both these women are the same age. Ketlen Vieira is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage, 1-inch height advantage. She's just a better grappler in this fight by a significant margin. She's a judo black belt. She's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. I think she can probably take down Pannie Kianzad if she'd like to. Let's look at UFCstats.com. Pull this up. I don't think Pannie Kianzad has very good takedown defense. Let's see. 80% takedown defense for Pannie Kianzad. So really not bad. But against whom? Lena Landsberg, she didn't allow any takedowns there. She got taken down by Raquel Pennington. She was taken down by Alexis Davis and lost a decision there. She was taken down twice by Sijara Eubanks, who's a little bit undersized, taken down by Betchko Hea, which is a cause for 5 alarm fires. And other than that, she has not been taken down. So very interesting stuff. She was knocked down by Macy Chiasson and submitted on The Ultimate Fighter. So that's a lot to take in. But then we look at the Ketlen Vieira side. She was knocked out by Irene Aldana. So she could definitely get hurt and buzzed on the feet. She can get finished there. But it's only happened once, and Aldana is one of the hardest punchers in the weight class, so I'll almost give her a break for that. Pannie Kianzad has rocked girls before, so give her that credit. She does throw with some power, does throw with some intention, but she's really not a great finisher. Let's look at Pannie Kianzad's resume in the UFC. I don't know that she's finished anybody. Yeah, 5 wins all by decision, 2 losses by decision, 1 loss via sub, and that was against Macy Chiasson in the second round via rear naked choke. So again, if you're getting submitted by Macy Chiasson, I think Ketlen Vieira is very live to win this fight by submission against Pannie Kianzad if she's able to get her down. So Sijara Eubanks, good credentialed jiu-jitsu player, not nearly the same size as somebody like Ketlen Vieira. Ketlen Vieira is huge. She's a big girl for the division. She's strong. She's physical. And I honestly feel like this might be a fight where Ketlen Vieira lets go a little bit. Number one, she's coming off a loss. After she lost to Irene Aldana, she did go out there and get the win against Sijara Eubanks in her next fight, out-wrestled her, out-grappled her, a little bit along the way, also landing shots on the feet. So when you look at Ketlen Vieira, she got the win against Holly Holm. Everybody gave her a lot of grief, but she kind of laid out the blueprint for Mayra Bueno Silva there. Outwork her in the clinch, beat her up, land big shots that make her uncomfortable, and when you get an opportunity, snatch that neck. And Ketlen Vieira almost did the exact same thing, guys. And by the way, Mayra Bueno Silva was like plus 450 to win the fight by sub, and it closed all the way down to like plus 330 and stuff. That was very sharp. God bless everybody that took that. But on the other end, Ketlen Vieira, when she was fighting Holly Holm, to win by sub was plus 850. And I bet it for over a unit there because I was like, she's going to threaten. And she almost ripped her head off. So Ketlen Vieira has subs. She's got the ability to take girls out. She just isn't always aggressive enough. Andre Pedneras, her coach, is always on her case, really yelling at her like, please do more offense, go for more, because she's so gifted physically. And she has skills. She just needs to implement them with more aggression, more consistently throughout 15 minutes. I think if she does that, she's going to look like a clear hindsight favorite. She's going to beat up Pannie Kianzad. She's going to take her down. She's going to hit her with big shots on the feet. But overall, there's a lot of similarities between these girls. And Pannie Kianzad, European fighter, could get a little bit more of the local hometown crowd. But I just think that Ketlen Vieira is more likely to get takedowns, more likely to end up on top, more likely to be in dominant positions, more likely to control the fight in the clinch. So ultimately, I favor Ketlen Vieira here, but she just hasn't always been reliable at the short chalk price. So be a little nervous, but I think Ketlen's going to get the win. So let's pull up the odds here before we move along to the next fight. Ketlen Vieira in this fight is checking in at a minus 150 favorite, best available on Caesars and WinBet. You're seeing as high as minus 182 out there on Bet Rivers. And meanwhile, the best available comeback, plus 140 on Pannie Kianzad, on PointsBet and Resorts World. So a couple shops out there offering different odds here, kind of shading their odds in different directions. You're seeing as low as plus 125 on Pannie Kianzad at Caesar Sportsbook. So a lot of different books taking different opinions here. And honestly, I think the market's going to get some split action, but looks like Ketlen Vieira love is more prominent in the market. So I'm going to take a wait and see approach here and do a little bit more research before I get involved. DX Flyer says, hello, Liam. Hello, DX Flyer. Welcome to the show. Hope that you guys are enjoying, and we still got plenty to talk about. So without further ado, let's move it along to the next fight on the card. At 155 pounds, we got Chris Duncan, the problem, taking on the Red Fox Ashmos. And, went out there in his last fight. He got the job done, got the big KO victory, shocked the world, finished Sam Patterson in London. So now he's getting the call back. Hey, let's do it again. You got Chris Duncan. You got this guy who is coming in with a bunch of, momentum, 3 wins in a row, got the win via split decision over Omar Morales last time out on the very same card. So now these two guys being matched up together, 2 winners paired off. And, the win over Charlie Campbell is aging great. Charlie Campbell just went out there in his last fight, got another huge knockout win. So Charlie Campbell still looks like the goods, but our guy, Chris Duncan, was able to surprise him, catch him off guard, hit him with that big knockout shot. And guys, I had Charlie Campbell in that fight at minus 150. I'd probably take it again if they fought again. I mean, I think he was a better fighter, but the truth is it was just a little bit more volatile, than I expected. And honestly, he hurt Chris Duncan 2-3 times in the first few seconds of the fight. And then Chris Duncan, so tough, fought through it, landed a huge shot, and put him all the way out. So Chris Duncan's power is not to be trifled with, not to be slept on. He's landed a bunch of big shots. He can be hurt. He could be dropped. He could be rocked. Omar Morales got to his chin a little bit. Vyacheslav Borshev got to his chin a little bit. Slava Claus, if you will. He got to his chin as well. So it's not like he can't get to his chin, but he's so damn tough. You got to shut him off like Slava did, or he's not going to stop fighting you. He's going to fight you to the bitter end. Chris Duncan really wants to be there, really wants to win. And you see that in the preparation. You see that in the training. You see that in the American Top Team move. 10 weeks of training camp that he's doing out there to prepare for these fights, working with very high-level guys, Mateusz Gamrot, Dustin Poirier, highest-level guys at 155 pounds. Chris Duncan's getting in work with them in one of the best rooms in the country, one of the best rooms in the world. He knew, all right, I did a lot of great work in Scotland. I got a lot of great training in. I got with the best partners I could. I got as good as I possibly could, but now I need to go to the States, get even more work, get even better, keep preparing, keep notching on my belt. And I think in this case, he's a guy that has a lot of the UFC backing. The UFC gave him 2 shots on Contender Series. The UFC put a lot of time, effort, and energy into him, and I think they're trying to build him up in a reasonable fashion. They got a guy who's tough, Ashmuz, very dangerous guy, right? Came in, surprised everybody, huge knockout, could do it again. He's got big power, but he's also a guy that is still on the come up. He's out of K Dojo Warrior Tribe. He's a guy that has, not stacked that much experience, definitely more fights for his opponent here, but he does have some grappling. He does have some striking. So he can really mix up the realms of this fight. But I think that the physicality of somebody like Duncan is going to be potentially a problem for him here. Because you look at Duncan, he's going to have a 3.5-inch reach advantage. He's going to be 1 inch taller. He's 2 years older, but these are both guys who are around 30 years of age. So I'm not thinking that age is going to play a huge factor. But Chris Duncan, let's talk about, in fact, let's do this. Let's see if I can share my screen here. So let's share my screen and we'll go right here. So now you guys should be able to see my Patreon. I hope that you guys can see it. So go ahead and comment. Let me know if there's any problem. But 10 hours ago, I posted my Chris Duncan fight tape. And let's just take a look because I think this is a good example of what we have here. So only 6 pages, but we've got his social media. And I talked about how when I first took these notes, he was at 8.4 thousand followers. He's grown 10,000 since the Contender Series. On Twitter, he's 5x'd his following as well. His current training partners, guys, let's highlight this right here because this is something I took before his last fight. Grant Dawson, 155-pounder, great grappler, good guy to be training with. Dalton Rasta, 185-pound stud for Bellator, very good fighter. Mateus Gamrot, Hanato Moicano. Those are two guys that are, again, fringe or ranked UFC lightweights, very high level. Sydney Outlaw, Bellator fighter. Dustin Poirier, 155-pound contender. Jorge Masvidal. Then all the guys he trains with as well over in Scotland at MXP. Ross Houston, Jack Grant, Rob Whiteford. These are all high-level guys. So now we're back here. And I wanted to just talk about the fact that we're looking at guys like Chris Duncan who are 30 years of age, but they just started training in the States. And we know they can make vast improvements fight over fight. Last time out, he's a wrestler now, right? This is a guy who's out there banging it out in wild fashion with everybody on the feet. And he wanted to wrestle Omar Morales. He gave up a couple positions, but he fought hard the entire time. He gave it an honest go. And I think he's a guy that's going to continue to get better. So I'm not ruling out that Chris Duncan comes out here and out wrestles Yanal. I'm not ruling out that he knocks out Yanal. Yanal is not invincible to getting knocked out either. He hasn't been put out yet, but this is 155 pounds. Chris Duncan hadn't been put out before he met Slava. So I think that either one of these guys could get, that long nap here. But I also think that Chris Duncan is going to try and introduce that wrestling path. I think it's going to be a great, back and forth type of fight. But it seems like there's a lot of love coming in the way of Yanal Ashmouz. Let's look at the Tapology voting here. 76% of Tapology voters are on Yanal Ashmouz. And let's talk about one long-standing trend. A long-standing trend in MMA, and if you guys have read Fightnomics, another book that we've talked about before on the show, it talks about this fact as well. One of the most overrated things in the market is first-round knockouts because they're a little bit more volatile, they're a little bit less predictable, and they're a little bit less predictive. Just because I get a first-round knockout doesn't mean my next fight is going to be a first-round knockout. So if I don't knock out Chris Duncan in the first round and my name is Yanal Ashmouz, and how do I do? If I fought Sam Patterson and I don't knock him out in the first round, how does that fight turn out? We still don't know. So this guy has had a very short amount of time in the UFC octagon. We don't have all that much to evaluate. But on the Chris Duncan side, he went a full hard 15 minutes with a guy in Omar Morales who went the 15 minutes with Giga Chikadze, who went the 15 minutes with other good guys in the UFC. Omar Morales is not a bad fighter. He's just a guy that's slowing down, a little bit older. The UFC's using him as a benchmark. And I think that they got some more experience for Duncan. They gave him more time to develop. And now Duncan's coming in here with a ton of confidence, and people are counting him out. People aren't really looking, to back him if you're looking at Tapology, but then you're looking at the market and it's going the other way. The market is supporting that there's some money coming in on the Duncan side. So for me, kind of leaning towards Duncan here. Initially I thought there was some value on Yanal, but the more I looked at this fight, the more I could kind of see why Duncan could come out on top here. K Dojo Tribe, not a slouch gym at all. Very good fighters, no doubt about it. But I think both these guys are very good. And the way that the market's moving, the way that public perception is, recency bias, I think that there's a lot to be said for that. So interesting notes here. Capping Service says, didn't know you were streaming. Lucrative stream just got done. From now on, do this show together, please. Yo, I will say this. Me and Lucrative have definitely talked a little bit about doing a show together. So definitely something I will consider. We've done a lot of collaborative content. So for me, great guy to work with along the way. Very sharp guy. Always enjoy our conversation. So would be an absolute pleasure, man. And I didn't know that he was streaming right now. Otherwise, I would not have tried to counter program him or anything, but just doing our own thing over here. And he's always welcome on this program as well. So appreciate that comment, and always light it up in the comments below. If you guys want to see that, if you guys want to see any kind of collaboration, go ahead and let me know. Always happy to try and make, things happen for the people. Try and give you guys what you want, right? And sharpest chat in the game. Y'all deserve a very sharp conversation. So bets and banter, I always try and make sure we have good guests. We bring on sharp people. But I also, I'm open to, doing other kinds of content, other kinds of collaboration. So anything that you guys want to hear, let me know, and we'll always try and make it happen for you. So basically, guys, I think Duncan probably the side, but not a fight where I'm rushing to the window. I'm going to take in some more information here. Duncan just looks like he's incredible physical condition. I want to see these two guys square off. I think Duncan is going to look, larger by a pretty decent amount, personally. Shout out to Kristen in the chat, says, we do not sleep when we're tired. We sleep when the job is done. Great stuff as always, Liam. Appreciate you, Kristen. It's a huge blessing. And, for me, the pleasure is all mine. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you, everybody, for contributing as well. Sharpest chat in the game. Make sure you guys drop a like if you haven't already. And we're going to move along to the next fight here because we still got a couple great fights to break down. So without further ado, let's do it. We've got a fight in the women's strawweight division. And guys, this is a fight that I was doing my tape right before we got on the air because Shauna Bannon, Mama B, an Irish woman after my own heart. I'm kidding, of course. But what we're talking about here is a UFC debutante, right? So when I don't have the fight tape available, the first thing I do is I go do a cursory glance. I watch their tape without taking the notes so I could just get a feel for them. So I could just start to see what their game operates like. And Shauna Bannon likes to kick, They put her against another girl here in Bruna Brazil who likes to kick. So fascinating fight here at women's strawweight. Bruna Brazil making a very quick turnaround here after losing her UFC debut in April. 3 months turnaround after getting knocked out, right hook to ground strikes by Denise Gomes. And we know from her last fight, Denise Gomes ain't nothing to trifle with. She is really dangerous. She brings a lot of power to the table. She can win by knockout. So she gets a lot of respect for sure. However, Bruna Brazil, where is her record, to get excited about? She beat McCann on Contender Series. Guys, McCann was comically undersized there. So it was a good win, but honestly, it was like a really gross mismatch in hindsight. She got the win over Ingrid Silva. She clearly has some power, some aggression, but I do not think that Bruna Brazil is all that she's necessarily cracked up to be. Let's talk about the odds here. I'm trying to pull up the odds. Perfect. Bruna Brazil, Shauna Bannon. So when you look at the odds here, you're seeing Bruna Brazil price minus 150 best available, minus 158 on FanDuel, minus 155 on WinBet, but most books hanging about a minus 150 here. And that's shown some movement, right? Because Bruna Brazil, I think, opened closer to a pick'em price. Let's bring up fightodds.io. So if you guys are ever wondering what kind of resources that I use bestfightodds.com, I use fightodds.io, I use VSIN, I use all sorts of different resources to try and make sure that I cover all my bases, that I get all the different numbers that I can. But I like to look at where BetOnline opens and moves their numbers to, because I have a lot of respect for what they do. And Bruna Brazil opened plus 135 on BetOnline, ladies and gentlemen, and she is now a minus 150 favorite in this spot. So definitely some movement towards the Brazil side. But let me tell you why I'm, thinking that Shauna Bannon may be the side here. Listen, taking Irish girls against Brazilian girls, probably not plus EV long-term, right? But when I'm thinking about this fight, I think Shauna Bannon showed in her regional level fights that when she faces some adversity, she doesn't just quit. She stays tough. She stays disciplined. She tries to keep fighting. And she's got good kicks on the feet. She's got an ability to switch stances, move in and out of range. When people try and crowd her, when people try and get all up in her business, she tends to throw back with 1-2s, and get back onto her horse, find her footing, and then throw again. So I think there's a lot of positives on the Shauna Bannon side. But let's also talk about the negatives, right? We're talking about a girl making her UFC debut. She does not even have Contender Series experience like our girl on the other side, Bruna Brazil, did. But Shauna Bannon did get a win in Invicta, 2 wins in Invicta, 3 wins in Cage Legacy. So the Cage Legacy wins were all over really low-level opponents, including 2 wins over the same girl. So I'm not really going to credit that too much. But I watched the Minna Grusander fight in Invicta in full before we got on the air today. So Minna Grusander is 6-4. She's not going to set your hair back, or set your hair on fire, right? She's not lighting the world on fire. She's not a great fighter, but she seemed competent. She seemed like she had an idea of how to fight, and she went for some takedowns. She tried to get on top. She tried to grapple. She tried to do a couple different things to mix it up. And Shauna Bannon ultimately just showed she was a better fighter, defended the takedowns, had an idea of what to do, was reaching for underhooks, was able to hip bump into the mount, defended takedowns, knew what to do late in rounds to win rounds as well, going for takedowns late, going for knockdowns late, going for big kicks and punches at the end of rounds and trying to put a stamp on it. So I just felt like she understood the optics of winning fights. And I think this girl, Bruna Brazil, she's a little bit overrated. And coming back so quickly off a KO loss against a girl who's going to try and kick you in the head and who's not afraid of being at kicking range, which is where Bruna Brazil likes to be, I don't know. Like, it just doesn't really make sense to me. So despite it being a UFC debutante and me not having the most bullish, read on this fight, and despite the fact that I may be biased because this is an Irish girl and I'm just disclosing that up front, but I watched that fight and I said to myself, Shauna Bannon probably should be evens here. And that's bookmakers thought she should be favored. So, for me, I'm just going to take Shauna Bannon as an underdog or pass on this fight. Maybe I'll look for some violence. But I just think Shauna Bannon is probably going to get this done, and I think the crowd might be on her side. So it's kind of my gut here. Next up, we've got the first fight of the night, the first Brazilian representative taking on our next UFC debutante. It's Jafel Filho taking on debutante Daniel Barez, and Daniel Barez dropped a Contender Series split decision against the very tough Carlos Hernandez. But a lot of people thought he won that fight. It was a very close fight. And I think that, when you look at this kind of fight, Daniel Barez showed he can fight hard for 15 minutes there. He can really mix it up, scramble on the ground. And since then, he's recorded 4 straight first-round finishes. Are they against high-level opponents? No. But the UFC works so simply, guys, right? When you watch the UFC, oh, my God, capping service, far too kind, brother. Absolutely generous of you. $20 dono. Makes it all worth it, my brother. It's always my pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for kicking in a little bit. We always hope to help you guys cash bets, help you guys think about the fights more clearly. So if I'm ever accomplishing that, my job, I feel like, is done. And, the dono is just so greatly appreciated, my man. Thank you. Thank you. Capping service. Appreciate you big time, brother. Means the world. So with that being said, let's try and keep giving some information that can help the public here. I remember thinking Daniel Barez, good guy, can push the pace, talented fighter, but, he was giving up some takedowns, I believe, in that Carlos Hernandez fight. Let's pull up the stats so I don't speak out of my hat here. We've got Jafel Filho, Daniel Barez. Both guys have a small sample size here. So Daniel Barez actually recorded 5 takedowns of his own against Carlos Hernandez. So the problem was he was not able to keep him down, right? And the subs for Daniel Barez, 2 attempts for Daniel Barez to 1 attempt for Hernandez. I'll have to go back and rewatch it, but I remember it being a scramble fest, and Barez, I guess, just couldn't keep him down. Hernandez getting up too much, and Hernandez has shown a good get-up ability in his fights. The thing about Jafel Filho is, Muhammad Mokaev took him down 4 times and was able to eventually get that submission. But people must have forgot, about Jafel Filho's grappling. He almost broke the knee of Muhammad Mokaev. He had a deep knee bar in that fight. He showed his grappling, skill and his plaudits and his abilities there. Shout out to our guy capping service. I'm interrupting my thought because he just dropped a knowledge bomb. He said, I, as an MMA handicapper, do not take any shame in weighing and taking into the accounts the opinions of other sharp handicappers. My man, this is the name of the game. Why would I try and pretend I'm the smartest guy in the world all the time, right? When there's so many other people that are proven sharp winners as well. So does that mean we don't do independent research? No, of course not. We always try, that's what the nature of this show is. Come to the game, with my independent thoughts and opinions based on what I've seen from these fighters. But then I take in the best opinions that I can. I take in the best information that I can from every sharp corner of the internet that I could find. And there's not that many of them, but there are a lot of sharp people out there as well. So you got to sift through and find the people that are real long-term winners, the people that have a lot of interesting things to say, the people that do original analysis. And if you find those people, support them. Make sure you show love. In fact, before we even finish breaking down this Barez fight, let me just take a brief second to interlude and say there's a ton of people that I respect, and I try and get their opinions as much as I can. Our guy, Jewish Better, who's on the show, we talk in the DMs. We have great conversations. Marcus from Nubian Bookstore in Atlanta. We have great conversations about sharp betting angles weeks and months in advance sometimes. best fight picks. Guy I really respect, guy who's been in this space for a very long time, tracking his bets, by the way, third party on betmma.tips, doing a great job along the way. So there's guys like that. There's guys like my buddy Gordo Gambles, a guy I met in person, great individual, and also puts out really sharp content. So I think that there is room for everybody. I think that there's room for more people in the space, as long as they're knowledgeable, doing the homework, really like to be here, like to be positive. That what's wrong with a couple more great voices in the space? And I do think that there's a lot of people that I've learned lessons from along the way. Ozzy P, Martian MMA. These are other guys that put on very sharp podcasts week in, week out. I think you'd be foolish not to listen to their show. I think you'd be foolish not to listen to people that are established winners in the space if they're putting out free information. So I do listen to shows like that always. And I try and get the best information that I can each week, as well as doing all my own independent research to make sure that I vet, to make sure that it makes sense to me. Because at the end of the day, guys, the read has to make sense to you. Sometimes you'll have a bet that it won't make sense to anybody else, but if it makes sense to you, that could be your edge on the market. And I think that for me, oh, my guy, half the battle. Our guy says, that's mighty kind of you. Still waiting for the wrestling technique of the week. My man, we have the craziest story to share on that front. There was a week of cancellations for the wrestling because the roof fell in on the old school. So now we've got a new location. So we're going to be back at the wrestling open mats very soon, and we got to get on that technique of the week. So shout out to our guy, Dan Levy, half the battle. Great show. Very well worth the support and the listen. And guys, OGs in the space, there's not that many of them, right? So learn from the ones that are around, and our guy is doing a great job on the content front, also on the honesty, transparency, accountability front. And that's the hardest thing to maintain over time, right? It's easy to say, nice things. It's easy to do the right thing once, but integrity is doing the right thing over and over again, whether people are watching or not. And I feel like Dan Levy is setting the example along with some other people in the space as well. So just a huge shout out to you, brother. And thank you for all that you do. Shout out to our guy, Herc MMA, for the $5 dono. He's got monkeys going in the chat. We appreciate the contribution, Herc. Thank you for sticking with us as well. Just a lot of great positive feedback today and great vibes, great conversations with everybody. So God bless you all. Thank you guys for making it fun. Let's get back to this prelim curtain jerker, Jafel Filo. Man, Jafel Filo, I feel like that last fight, if it was anybody but Muhammad Mokaev, they're probably tapping out in that knee bar, right? They're probably having to relent. They're probably saying, I'm not going to win this fight. And instead, Mokaev's such a gangster. He took the damage. He said, whatever, I'm going to get the win here no matter what. He took some damage to get the win, and he did it. So Muhammad Mokaev, if you go back and look at his Twitter and whatever, he says most of you guys will never understand what it means to be a champion. It means that when, you feel discomfort and pain, your first instinct isn't let me preserve myself. It's how can I find a way to win? And that is what separates the good from the great and the great from the elite. And it's just these levels of psychotic, like how deep will you go to win? And I truly believe that these guys like Mokaev that are championship tier prospects, they are willing to give everything to win in the octagon. And we saw that last time out. He's willing to give his ability to walk to win in the octagon. Are you? That is what separates these fighters, from the rest of us as well. But you look at this guy, Jafel Filo, he's shown he's got dangerous skills in all positions. He can fight on the feet a little bit too. He's not the world's most dangerous striker, but he does have some power. He does have some ability, to get in there and contend with these guys. He's not afraid to get into a fight. And when it comes to, how he's lost, he's tended to lose actually by getting submitted. He's been submitted twice, his two most recent losses, but he's got a win over Vinicius Salvador, UFC level guy. Roybert Echeverria, a guy that was highly touted coming into Contender Series out of the Goat Shed, and a guy that's probably going to get another crack on this season of Contender Series, I would assume. So, they tried to get this guy, Jafel Filo, a Juan Camilo Renderos fight, guys. And with all due respect to Juan Camilo Renderos, a tough guy, a guy that's seasoned, had a lot of fights, in terms of his amateur career. He's 4-2 as a professional. I felt like they were really trying to give him a little bit of a setup there. And Juan Camilo pulled out of that fight. He's 0-2 in the UFC. He probably didn't want that kind of matchup because it would have been a really rough matchup for him to come back to. So instead, they give him Daniel Barres, a guy that lost on Contender Series, a guy that then racked up some nice experience regionally, but he's now making his UFC debut. We know guys tend to struggle in their UFC debut. We know that Daniel Barres is a guy that likes to get on top, go for takedowns, work his ground game. That could be a problem against Rafael Filo, who's a very dangerous counter grappler. So for me, I'm kind of interested in the fight ends by sub. I wonder what the price will be. I think that Filo is going to attempt a lot of subs here, but I also think on the other side, Barres, he's a tough guy. He's gritty. If he's able to survive, if he's able to outlast, he might be able to put on his own grappling performance late in the fight here. So I think that that's something to watch for here. Rafael Filo, no punk at all. Lost his last fight, but don't think that he's not a very serious challenge for guys, because I do think his ground game presents challenges for people, and we saw it in his last fight. He was not out of place at all with Makhachev on the mat, so I think that this is a guy who's got some staying power. So shout out to Keith Gordon in the chat, says, hey, Liam, long time no see. What cap, my man? Mets, Blue Jays. That blue is very specific, and it's because we bleed blue for the New York Rangers in this household, my brother. My dad's a huge hockey fan. I mostly care about fight sports, but always got to bleed blue for our Rangers here. Like our New York teams a little bit, but also root for our Ohio State brethren. So New York and Ohio, the two states that I rep for, put on for in the great US of A, but also an Irish American son of a bitch myself. So that's what I'm repping. If y'all had any questions, now y'all know that's where I stand. That's where I'm at. I love everybody, but that's me. That's who I am, and that's what you get. What you see is what you get. So there you have it, guys. We got the whole card done, wrapped up in the books. That's UFC London. That's my thoughts. That's my first look at the card. So I think we've covered a lot of great ground tonight. 2 hours, 15 minutes, covered a lot of good fights, but we also talked a lot about technique, a lot about strategies. We talked about our past betting results. We talked about our results last week as well, accountability there. So if you look at our last 5 events, all tracked third-party BetMMA.tips, information in the description below, then you'll see we're 3-1-1 in our last 5 events. We never let our highs get us too high. We never let our lows get us too low. We stick to the same process here. We ride the waves. I'm here each and every week betting on these fights, right? So can't get emotional with any 1 week of results. It's all about the long term for me. Let's go through and let's do an accountability check together real quick. I'm pulling up my BetMMA so we can do the share screen here. And let's talk about my results so far for the year. We'll always just do full transparency here. So this is my lifetime results here that you're looking at. 8% ROI on 132.95 units profit over the years that I've been doing this. Like the standout numbers, 35% ROI on big underdogs. So big underdogs, definitely my biggest moneymaker by far. Also done well on big favorites, 13% ROI. This middle range, 1% negative ROI on slight underdogs, 2% ROI on slight favorites. So for me, still always learning and growing, trying to get a little bit better as I go, but knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, that is, to quote our guy's great name for a show, half the battle. So I think that what we're looking at in terms of my results that have gone well is betting on plus money, plus 180 average odds lifetime for me. That is, my strength. My strength is looking at those plus money numbers. Always wish you guys do whatever is best for you. But now you guys can see this is every event. Last week, we lost that half unit, unfortunately, but 3 weeks prior, we had profit. We lost 0.8 units at UFC 289, profited before that. So overall, let's go to our yearly results, guys. So you could see we win more than we lose on this show. Okay, 52% winning events, 83 winning events, 77 losing events. So all transparency here. I'll tell you about the ones that go well. I'll tell you about the ones that go poorly. My best event, I won 24 units. My worst event, I reverse swept the board for minus almost 30 units on the night. So if you guys notice, this year, my biggest betting outlay on a single card was like 6 units. I've gotten a lot more responsible with my bet sizing per card, per event. It's just a personal decision for me. Don't like the volatility as much. So what we're looking at this year, plus 7.1 units. So not as much as last year, but look how much little we haven't risked very much, right? Less than 70 units of risk on the year for 7 units profit at a 10% ROI. So maintaining 3 years profitability here, trying a new strategy this year that's a little bit lower risk and a little bit higher ROI. So that is the accountability check, guys. We're up on the year. We're doing well. Didn't go so good last week, but still feeling very good about the year and the opportunities to come. We've got one bet already locked in for UFC 291. Did post that on Patreon. I'll give a hint to the public. The line has moved a little bit, so I don't feel bad sharing this. The people got, better information, better numbers, better lines at the time that it was posted. But, I'm fading Derek Lewis at UFC 291 with my guy, Nubian Bookstore, Marcus. The reason I took the play early, which I normally don't do, and sent it out early, which I normally try and wait till closer to fight time, I knew that the number was going to move. Marcus, sharp guy, tweeted it out, shared publicly that he thought that the number was going to move, and he got in at -120 at Caesars. So then I checked OddsJam, -113 on FanDuel, last number under -120 on the board. So I took advantage. Let's go to OddsJam right now, and let's look up Derek Lewis and Marcos Rogerio de Lima. So -120, currently still the best available price on the de Lima side. -133 on Pinnacle, -126 market average, and you're seeing plus money comebacks of +116 on Pinnacle for Derek Lewis. So here's the reason that I ended up fading Derek, because I'll share this with you guys now, and let you guys in on my thought process a little bit. Listen, I could be wrong. It's a heavyweight fight. It's volatile, but I don't think that Derek Lewis has been training particularly hard for his recent fights. I don't think he landed a significant strike in his last fight. Marcos Rogerio de Lima should arguably be on a 5-fight win streak. Let's bring up Marcos Rogerio de Lima, his recent run in the UFC. So for me, I think that de Lima, solid fighter, his big fatal flaw is what, guys? His submission game, right? You could just submit Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He doesn't have a great submission game. He's not very comfortable off of his back. And Derek Lewis, he has tended to do well historically as an anti-wrestler. Other strikers have really given him a lot of problems. And Rogerio de Lima is a striker. He can go out there and hurt people, knock them out. He knocked out Ben Rothwell in the first round. Ben Rothwell looked slow. He looked a little tired. He looked a little lethargic. But what did he do? He went out there, he beat him up, beat him to the ground, hit him with huge leg kicks there. Marcos Rogerio de Lima has just looked like a much better fighter in the recent run in his career than he ever did prior. Let's look at his last few fights, right? Waldo Cortez Acosta, that's a young guy on the come up, still young, still needs to gain more experience. But Waldo Cortez is a fresh guy, right? He's a guy that's still got a chin, can still move, knows the game. Rogerio de Lima goes out there, bully balls him for a unanimous decision. Andre Arlovski, a guy who's been submitted not very many times in his career. He was submitted by Aspinall. He was submitted by Marcos Rogerio de Lima in the very first round, took him down, easy money on the ground. Blagoy Ivanov did not win that fight, in my view, guys. I thought Rogerio de Lima won that fight. I thought he deserved it. I thought he did more. Let's look back at the stats there and see if I'm out to lunch. Let's see if I'm biased, because I'll tell you what, I bet in there, and I thought he won that fight. I really did. Let's see. Oh, I'm in the wrong fight card. So let's look at the upcoming card for Poirier Gaethje 2. Here we go. So when you look back, Rogerio de Lima outlanded Blagoy Ivanov 68-62 on significant strikes and got the only takedown of the bout. So for me, I had a bet on Rogerio de Lima, but honestly, I thought I got hosed there. I had 3.5 units at +135. I thought he won the fight. I thought he deserved the win. In any case, he didn't get it. It was a close fight, so I'm not going to cry over spilled milk. No sense doing so. But it does tell me that there's a world in which, Rogerio de Lima is on a 5-fight win streak. Because he beat Ben Rothwell in knockout the fight before that, and he beat Maurice Green via decision by easily taking him down and laying and preying on him. So basically, when you look at this guy, he's got many ways to win a fight. He can take you down and lay on top of you. He can submit you, and he can knock you out. That's a pretty good strategy for winning MMA fights. He's got a similar age opponent here in Derek Lewis, but Derek Lewis has been on the opposite run. As opposed to 4-1 in his last 5, he's 1-4 in his last 5. His only win is over Chris Daukaus, who I don't believe has won a fight in his last 4 fights. Let's check. Chris Daukaus. has lost 3 fights in a row, all via knockout in round 1, starting with that, all via knockout in the first 2 rounds, all starting with that Derek Lewis knockout. So that's a bad sign. The only guy you beat has been on a really tough run, and he hasn't proven that he's, able to compete with these top-level guys. Then on the other side, you got knocked out by Tai Tuivasa. I bet Tai Tuivasa huge there as an underdog. You got knocked out by Sergey Pavlovich. I bet Sergey Pavlovich there is a short favorite. And Sergey Spivak, I thought that was the time when Derek Lewis was going to bounce back. Guy who's been knocked out in the first round before. Guy who kind of is tentative out there sometimes. And he didn't even land, any real shots of note. 0 significant strikes landed against Sergey Spivak. 4 significant strikes landed against Sergey Pavlovich. 27 significant strikes landed and 2 takedowns against Tai Tuivasa. So I don't really expect that he's going to be going for takedowns against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, but I suppose it's a path. 14 significant strikes against Chris Daukaus in a knockout win, and 16 strikes over 3 rounds against Cyril Gane when he got finished via TKO, absorbing 98 significant strikes. So now let's just talk about the broad sample size of Derek Lewis. He has a negative strike rate. He has a 41% striking defense, 50% accuracy. Those are negative differentials in the UFC. Those are not elite stats at all in the UFC for striking metrics. The only thing that he's had in spades is power, big power. He's got knockout power, no doubt about it. Rogerio de Lima has 1 career loss by knockout. So unless Derek Lewis is going to take him down, I just have a really bad feeling for Derek in this fight that his time is done. I don't think he trains anymore. I don't think he gives a shit. I don't think he wants world titles. I think he wants money. I think he wants a bag. I try and remind people all the time, Derek Lewis is not a nice guy. He's a former felon, right? And I don't mean that in a disparaging way either. I just mean when he gets in the cage, he's trying to kill people or get a bag. That's it. He's trying to hurt people and not care and laugh in their face after they're asleep, or he's trying to get the bag. So Derek Lewis, if this fight goes sideways for even a second, I think he's going to quit and give it up, So that for me is a huge problem. Dana White last time out was like, no, Derek Lewis will always have a place in the UFC. It doesn't matter. So I think that Derek Lewis knows I don't need to win these fights. I need to go out there, have some fun, say, oh, damn, my back was hurting before this camp. And, hopefully I get the next one. And then they'll have me back. So truthfully, no, and I'm not saying, Ryan, that's my point. I'm not trying to say anything wrong with felons. I'm saying Derek Lewis isn't a normal cage fighter like a guy who came up through Division I athletics or something. I'm saying he's a guy that is used to fighting people to death or fighting people to hurt people. He's not about a casual fight life or winning title belts and things like that. It's not about athletic achievement. It's about the bag and hurting people. That's it. So Derek Lewis is a very simple man in that way. And for me, I feel like Derek Lewis, fun guy, awesome, super marketable. He doesn't need to win these fights. I think that Derek Lewis is going to get taken down, mauled, or beat up on the feet and quit. So I like Marcos Rogerio de Lima. I didn't go crazy on the bet because it's Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He's quit many times. He's not the most durable fighter in the world. But I just truly, truly think that, when I watch somebody like Marcos Rogerio de Lima, he does not look like he's washed at all right now. And I do think that when I watch somebody like Derek Lewis, he looks completely washed to me. Our guy Laguna 187 says, where did Lewis and Sergey come up on this card? It didn't, brother. We finished the card. So I was just giving you guys an early look and saying, I got a bet for UFC 291. I did take in advance. So that is a UFC 291 early look for me, just because y'all stuck it out with me till 2 a.m. Eastern time, and I appreciate that you guys did. So just dropping a free play. I did take that at -113 myself. I took it to win 1 unit, and I sent out that information on Patreon a couple of days ago because my guy Marcus was tweeting about it. I knew the number was going to run a little bit. So I think closer to fight time, would not be surprised if Rogerio de Lima's -150 when people see that he's 4-1 in his last 5, Derek Lewis 1-4 in his last 5. But it's not going to go too much wider than that in one direction or the other because Derek Lewis gets a ton of love because Derek Lewis is a very public fighter. And I do think the public on a pay-per-view card will come in and back Derek Lewis. So that's what makes me think if I want, maybe I'll get plus money on De Lima after all, if I wait and if I'm patient. But I just knew 113, I felt like it was going to run. So I took it. If it comes back, if it comes my way and I get a better number, maybe I'll take that. So shout out to you, brother. Didn't mean to confuse anybody. Just wanted to give a little bit of early information and show love to the people that are showing love to me and rocking with us at this hour. So 50 people still rocking with us live. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. But as we round into this 2 hour, 30-minute mark, I say we should cut it off for today. Come back to you guys on Thursday for bets and banter. Maybe come back in the interim with some more educational content, with some more other stuff that we've been working on the channel behind the scenes. So going to try and bring more content your way, but overall, making sure that we're ready for bets and banter on Thursday. I already have a guest that I've gotten in communication with for the pay-per-view next week. Huge guest, first-time collaboration if we can make it happen. And it's one that I'm extremely excited about. So hope that you guys will show some love as well. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, things that you want to get off your chest, favorite bet on the card, anything like that, please go ahead and fire it off in the comments section below. I always try and make a point of getting back to everybody throughout the week. So if it's questions, concerns about the Patreon, if it's questions, concerns about the content, if it's questions, concerns about an upcoming fight, an upcoming event, whatever it is, you can go ahead and fire those at me on social media at Liam Picks Fights or in the comments section directly below this video. So guys, I really appreciate the love and support. The easiest ways to show love and support, drop a like on the video, get subscribed on podcast platforms. If you haven't already, if you guys are into audio, if you like the shows that we do on this YouTube channel, Liam Picks Fights presents on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. It will have all my content housed there, and you guys can get all the audio versions right there. So you don't have to fret. You don't have to sweat it out. It's always going to be there after I record these on YouTube. We'll always put the audio file up there as well. For people that I know, a lot of people maybe can't sit down for the whole 2 hours and watch the YouTube video. No problem. Just show a little love on podcasts if you can. Drop a 5-star review if it's in your heart, because it means a lot. It helps other people find the show. The biggest thing you can do for me that's free, tell somebody about the show if you enjoy it. Share it with other people. If we help you win some bets, if we give you some good information, make sure you let people know where you find it and share it with somebody else, because it means the world to me when you do. Love having these conversations. Always room for one more in the sharpest chat in the game. And can't thank you guys enough for all the support that you show, all the great information that you guys drop as well in the chat. Integral relationship that I have with the people that watch this show. So you guys mean the world to me. Couldn't do it without you. And thank you guys for your support. So in the meantime, guys, God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. We'll come back and talk more UFC London on Thursday. And I wish you guys well. Until then, come back next time. We'll have all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.